Hello everyone. I'm Steve from the Mac84 YouTube channel. Welcome to another episode of OpenTalk number 5, Recreating the Macintosh SE. We have a very special guest today, Kai Robinson. I'm going to just make sure that the audio and the video sound good before I throw it over to him to introductions. So let me know in the chat if everything sounds good. We got a good, healthy showing of people so far, so thank you very much for joining on your Sunday afternoon or wherever it is, whatever part of the world you're in today. And glad to have you here. This is a rare double episode weekend. So we had an episode yesterday with the wonderful James, aka Hyper Talking from Instagram and Twitter. And we talked about all things PowerPC Macintosh clones. So if you haven't seen that episode, feel free to jump back and see that. I've added chapters to try and make some sense out of our winding conversations. So it looks like everything sounds good in the chat, which is excellent. So without further ado, I'm going to jump in and I'm going to add our guest Kai Robinson here. And we'll get him going in 3, 2, 1. There you go, Kai. You are now on the air.
Hello. Greetings. Hello, everybody. Good evening.
Great to have you here.
So, yeah. Oh, no, it's good to be here. Good to be here.
So do you want to sort of tell people about who you are? For those of you who don't have the pleasure to know who you are, if you want to sort of introduce yourself and explain why you're so awesome.
Okay, well, you're making me sound like I've got a huge ego there. But yeah, sure. So my name's Kai. I am the genius / mastermind, but no. I'm just the guy that came up with the idea of reverse engineering the Macintosh SE logic board one day, just out of sheer boredom, and also a little bit of frustration on the part of my vintage Mac collection. So I've been sort of lurking around kind of like vintage and retro stuff more so last sort of 5 years or so. But I've always kind of had a thing for 68K Macs. Power PCs, not so much. You know, it kind of, for me, after the era of the Quadras and everything, it all just kind of like, not really interested in it, you know, in any of that anymore. One of my early jobs was supporting a mixed Mac and PC network in the days of Mac OS 8.1 and trying to get those machines to play nice at the same time with the PostScript rips and keep everything from just not going wrong. It was like, please, nobody come into my office and sneeze, something will break, you know. So that kind of like era of Power PCs just kind of like left me cold because everything seemed very it's slow and like infuriating. So like the 68K stuff, that's where I have like my fondest memories of stuff. But some people may know me also from the Amiga community as well. I've done some designs of replacement DRAM boards as well. I was involved in the Amiga 500++ project, very peripheral role, admittedly. That was mostly like Rob Taylor stuff, but I was the one that decided to jump in and go, hey, I'll do your bill of materials for you. No problem. I'll go through the entire Commodore. Oh, God, what have I got myself into? And yeah, it's just stuff like, that project kind of was ultimately responsible for, the project we've got going now. Because, it was actually John Hurtle, known as Chucky Gang, on Exos forums and the English Amiga board as well, kind of came up with the idea of like, hey, I got an A1200. I wonder if I could reproduce these boards. And then he just decided to get busy with an orbital sander and a hot air station. And hey, it works.
Wow.
It works. That's how you get a 4-layer board and boards together. Although, to be fair, I don't have the advantage of an orbital sander. Instead, I just have a very sore wrist, which is, we'll get into that later. And that sounds totally dodgy. I do. Yeah, I'll shut up now.
Oh my goodness. Well, it sounds like you've been into vintage machines for quite a while. You talk about you have an affinity for the 68K Macs, and I think a lot of us that's sort of the sweet spot. I mean, I grew up with having a Macintosh 2CX in the household. That was my family's first computer. And we had Power Mac after that, and so they sort of blur together for me. And I enjoy a lot of games and stuff on both machines. But the 68K ones are where I spend most of my time repairing them, so that's most of the time I'm taking around with them. And there's always something I find that I'm learning that I haven't experienced before. And with the community that's out there these days, especially with individuals like yourself who are building peripherals or accessories or cables and add-ons and stuff just to push these machines further than the original people building them had ever possibly imagined, I think is absolutely fantastic. I mean, we have things like the SCSI2SD, we have things like, the floppy MU and all these things that allow you to, get running with these machines a little easier because, the original parts are degrading and things are getting much harder to find. eBay certainly isn't helping sometimes, so it definitely.
We're kind of our own worst enemy
Yes.
with that. Like, something becomes popular, it ends up on Hackaday. Suddenly, prices jump 3 billion%, and it's like, one lightly used Macintosh SE has got a hole in the side of the case. The CRT doesn't work. It's Maxell bombed all over the place. And they're only $999. It's collectible.
Plus $150 shipping. Yeah, that's.
Oh yeah. Can't forget that. Oh yeah, shipping from the US as well. Oh yeah, and don't forget the customs fees on top of that.
Yeah. So we are sort of our own worst enemy with that, but with me personally, I got into the early Macintosh machines because that's what my father needed for work. He did graphic design, and the Mac was what they used where he worked, and that was the only machine that he could use at the time. So that was the family computer. So I'm curious where your roots start for vintage computing or electronics, or were you just interested in some things and so on?
Electronics in general, probably since about the age of 2.
Okay.
At least that's where the kind of the initial kind of seed was planted. We were all sitting around the lounge in the flat where my parents were living at the time, and it was I think it was like summer holidays, and there was a James Bond film just starting on the TV. The intro sequence, and James Bond turns the camera like that, and the TV went pop. Literally the audio amplifier overloaded and just the whole telly blew up. We couldn't watch James Bond. It was the fact that after that, this was in the days where we didn't own the TV. We rented the TV. So the radio rentals people came out. Engineer would fix the TV rather than just like, oh, here's a new one. It's because it's a commodity item. It was expensive, so guy comes out, takes the back off the TV, and suddenly it's like Willy Wonka opening the doors of the chocolate factory. It's like, what is in there? What does this stuff do? And I'm just transfixed. Like there's a toddler. Like, what is this? What are you doing? And I'm like, I want to touch the shiny. And no, not allowed to touch the shiny. But I want to touch the shiny. No, doesn't touch the shiny. So it's kind of like electronics sort of started from that point. And ever since I was sort of old enough to pick up a soldering iron, I was disassembling stuff. People would bring me broken electronics to play with as a kid. I was like, oh, it's a clock radio, but I'd inevitably go inside and try and figure out, okay, why doesn't it work? That was my first thought. Why does this stop working? So I'd end up with loads of broken TVs, which ended up being free working TVs and stuff like that. And with the actual sort of vintage computing side of things, see, in the UK we had much more of a homegrown, micros in the 80s. I grew up, from 1982 onwards with originally it was the Acorn Electron. It was my brother's machine when he was about 14 or so, when he got it, and then it got kind of passed down to me. And by that point already, it was you hadn't been in the shops for ages. You couldn't buy anything for it. So what was in the box was all I had, unless it was you go to a car boot sale and you're picking something up for 50p. Then I went through the Amiga 500 and the Atari ST period. I absolutely my Amiga 500 Plus was that. That's what got me into the project as well. Is the good memories of the A500 Plus and just the capabilities of the machine. It's a 7.8 megahertz, 68,000 with 1 meg of RAM. But it seems mad what you can do with those custom chips in those machines. If you've seen any of the kind of the demos, and I'm actually lucky enough. The company I work at, I don't know if I'm allowed to mention. I won't mention it for a moment. But the company I work at, a lot of the guys who I work alongside, they're part of demo scene crews like the Black Lotus, who come out with some mad demos, and they go to all of the demo scene stuff every single year, and they're always submitting stuff, and the code they're coming out with is just mad. So what got me back into kind of retro through the years was just kind of I've got modern PCs. I've got all of the horsepower I could ever need. Sometimes it's nice to go back a step to kind of like, oh, it's just simpler when I can just bung in a floppy disk and play something, or oh look, the entire operating system is in ROM, and I don't have to rely on a broken hard disk or replace anything, and it's just also the feeling of nostalgia as well for Macs specifically. Again, Macs in the UK, they weren't as ubiquitous as they are in the States or Canada, just because by the time they got over here, they essentially just changed the dollar sign for the pound sign. And our purchasing power was a lot less. When a Mac Classic in the States was $999, over here it was still £999, which would have been about $1,500 to $1,600. It was way out of the realm of affordability for most people. Now, the school I went to boarding school. And one of the kids there he had a Macintosh SE 475. It was brand new. It was fresh out of the box when he got it. And he was a bit of a egotistical turd / show off. So he liked to kind of like bestow the ability to play games like SimCity 2000 on this, to us underlings who were, not worthy of being able to afford such a piece of equipment. I distinctly remember him being a bit of a Burke to me, so I deleted his system folder.
Classic prank.
Denied all knowledge of it. Yeah, it was just a case of, tell me, it wasn't me. I don't know anything about Macs. No, not me. Don't ask me. And then later on, I decided, do you know what? I rather enjoyed playing with it, like the LT 475. I love the pizza box form factor and just the fact that it was everything you needed in one tiny little compact package that was actually really well designed. And then sort of started going out from there, exploring like, the 2CI. Oh, wow, this is really well designed as well. It's modular. You can take it apart without a screwdriver. And kind of like built on from there. There's always been a fascination of kind of like, I couldn't afford this stuff when I was a teenager, and when I was like kind of curious about it, I'd spend my lunch break at school on the interwebs when it first came out. I'd be looking at everyone else would be looking at like ridiculous flash games or whatever, or trying to download porn, etc. And whereas I was sat in the corner looking at like Daystar's website and going, "Ooh, I wonder if I could get that for this Mac I don't own." The sort of like, wow, what could you do if you got one of those? Then put one of those in it, and then how much memory would that really support? And then looking through like before forums were a thing, and going through the old Usenet posts just to find loads of like information and stuff on it. And when it came to like the Mac SE, it was like, right, I'm reading through posts. I'm seeing, loads of people like getting really, really into the whole kind of vintage Mac thing. And then seeing their frustration that, oh no, I opened it up after like years in the attic and the battery's gone on it and it's killed the board. And so I was just kind of thinking in my head, we've done the A500++. We know that works. That's a thing. Wonder if anybody's doing it for the Mac community, for example. Because Rob Taylor is prolific when it comes to projects on the go. He's done the 60 clone, he's done the Vicky 20, the A500++. There's other ones in the works as well. But I thought, do you know what? How hard could it be? Famous last word. And so I decided to just jump in at the deep end. Like, okay, fine. What's a machine that suffers from like a Maxell bomb, battery bomb in a machine that would be relatively easy to reverse engineer? Now, at the time I started it, I didn't have a hot air station. I just had a soldering iron. And I thought, well, I've got a soldering iron. I've got a desoldering gun. SE. It makes the most amount of sense. It's all through hole construction. It's essentially, a bit of a speed bumped Mac Plus, but with internal SCSI as well. Yes, Neil is correct. If you need to know the best places in Brighton to eat, then I can tell you. Please drop me a line.
We'll keep that in mind, Neil. Thank you.
Well, we'll keep that in mind. I mean, the next time Neil comes down here, I've got to treat Neil to a curry, because the last time I went up there, he treated like me to a curry as well. So there's some back and forth.
Good bribing going on. Yeah.
Yeah. It's actually Neil's fault that I now like lime pickle. I blame him for my new rejection. It's entirely Neil's fault. So when it came to choosing a board, the SE made the most logical sense, and given the tools that I had to hand at the time, and the assumption was at the time incorrect that it's through hole. Surely it's only a 2-layer board, because it looks like everything is kind of laid out like, I mean, almost every trace that I can see on this board, it looks like everything is covered like front and back. Obviously, as you go through the project, you realize, oh, this is not the case. Okay. So, I mean, I started jumping at the deep end with with the Mac SE, pretty much after sort of being notified that there was this issue of Maxwell bombs. I was like, right, I'll fix this, I'll do it. Thinking, well, it doesn't. No one else seems to be doing it. No one else has any interest in doing it. Well, okay. Again, like I said, how hard can it be?
And so, just circling sort of back a little bit for your personal interest in the Macs, because that's one of the big dorky things I'm into, obviously. Did you start with a hand-me-down Mac, or how did you acquire your first Macintosh?
So my first Mac was the LC475. Weirdly, I asked my parents on my 18th birthday, "Can I have a really old Mac?"
Yeah.
And my mum gave a really confused expression of, "What?
Why would you want that for?
Don't you want something for your for your PC or a new game or something? And it's your 18th birthday. Do you want a car?" And I'm like, "No, I'd like an LC475, please." And at the time, out the back of like one of the magazines that I used to read at the time was Micro Mart. And there was a place that was advertising like second-hand Macs for sale. I mean, you could get an LC475 for like, I think it was £185 with a monitor and a keyboard, and a mouse, and a 160 meg hard drive. It was not bad price. And I just felt like I don't really want anything else. I'm just like, but I really wanted to kind of like play with a Mac properly, that wasn't someone else's that I had like limited time on. One that I could like, okay, it's old. If it breaks, no biggie. And then, funnily enough, from there I went straight from that to a Power Mac 7166. And about 6 months later, I bought a brand new iMac DVSE 500. So it's a bit of a leap.
That's
68K, early
box right there.
The latest bit. Yeah, I had it. It was graphite grey, and I loved that machine. I really did. That was my main machine for a while. And my PC saw very little use during that period of a good 2 years or so. So yeah, that's kind of like my early introduction to owning.
Nice. Yeah, that's very similar to because I my parents had a 68K Mac, then we had a 7500 Power Mac, and then it was a long gap between there when my father got a G4 desktop, and then he had that for years before he got an Intel Mac. But by the time he got a desktop, I got some old laptops and stuff like that, so that kept me busy. But that's interesting to hear that you had a 68K Mac, then you had a Power PC, then you had a G3. Did you stick around for Macs much after that, or you're mostly PC now?
I did have, my iMac. I exchanged my iMac for a Wall Street 266 that was fully decked out, and I was like, well, there's nothing that I really do on my iMac that I couldn't do on a PowerBook. And at the time, I was starting to go back more towards PC. I mean, I'd always had a PC alongside Mac. I never was like all one or the other. And my PC at the time, I was big into gaming, so most of the heavy lifting I did on the PC, and the Mac was mostly for just fooling around. Kind of, I'd watch at the time, there's episodes of Star Trek Enterprise when they came out, and like X-Vid, like 320 by 240. I'd watch those on the PowerBook in bed. And it was like such a novelty. It's like, ooh, I get to be in bed and watch like my favorite TV show at the same time. Yeah. And then from that Wall Street, I exchanged that with somebody for a Power Mac G3 Blue and White, and I think that was a 350. Nice. I'd like to say. And then after that, I ended up going off to university as a mature student, and I took that with me, like fully intending to use it, and it just sat and collected dust. And then somebody said, "Oh, hey, we could use one of those for like the audio lab," and I'm like, "Yeah, sure, there you go, have it for 50 quid." At that point, and then I just got out of the Mac game until I ended up working. So the company I worked for before now, we were a business-to-business like IT support firm, and it was entirely Mac-based. Everything was Mac-based. So kind of like thrown back into it again with a brand new MacBook Pro. Well, it was at one point brand new. By the time I got to it, it was a big healthy other spit and blade one.
Isn't that always the case with business units? Yeah.
Well, in their case, yes, it was like, oh, here, have this like manky, like 13-inch MacBook Pro. Oh look, we put an SSD in it. Ooh, yeah.
Don't mind the SATA port that can't address the full, SATA spec of this SSD. It's fast enough.
Yeah. And then the company I work for now, when when they employed me, the IT department were like, "So what do you want?" And I'm like, "Well, what do you mean? What do I want?" And I went, "Well, here's the way that they do things now is vastly different from when they did it then, but still, what do you want?" They give you a choice. Do you want a PC? Do you want a Mac? I guess I'll go with a Mac because I can boot camp that and I can have the best of both worlds. Okay, do you want a desktop or a laptop? I'm like, well, I'll have a laptop, please. Okay, here you go. There's a 15-inch, Core i9, 6-core, 12-thread with an RX 560 and 32 gig of RAM and a 2 terabyte SSD. And I'm like, yeah, I'll take it.
Yeah, twist my arm, why don't you?
Oh, yeah.
So,
and then I'm due for an upgrade this year. And so, they're kind of like dangling in front of me. You've had your machine for like 2.5 years. Do you want an upgrade? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm quite fond of my little work.
Yeah, isn't it weird? You sort of get fond of the machine that you're using, and you're sort of like, well, I know this one works. If you give me a different one, we might have some different things happening.
Well, it's because it's been through so much, and it's been literally all over the world. I mean, it's been to Copenhagen, it's been to Paris. Every time we've had like an expo or something, it's like, right, IT crew, in the backpack it goes, and it travels with me, and it gets emblazoned with stickers and everything. And then the problem is the process we have at my work is like, well, it's 3 years old now, time to take it away from you and recycle it. I'm like, I don't know, I kind of feel like grabbing hold of it, like, no, you will not come for this one. It's mine.
It looks like one of your next projects might be selling cosplay kits for yourself, Kai, because Neil wants to dress up. Neil is also bearded and has this shirt, so he can. But he will have to visit that curry house like a lot more often to be able to kind of pull off the Wait, that's not too bad. That's a manageable exercise, I think.
Yeah. Besides, I only sent him a large one. So it's like a 4XL.
He has some time to go. That's all right. So I'm just curious. I know it's sort of along the lines of your Mac experience there, but I'm always interested on individuals who have mostly come from a non-fully Mac background and what their experience was when they went from the classic Mac OS, let's say Mac OS 8.6, Mac OS 9, to Mac OS 10, because it was such a departure for Mac users. And I know that when I talked to my friends when I was in school, they were very curious of the operating system as PC users because they didn't care about the hardware. They wanted the structure and the engineering pieces and all the fun stuff of the OS. So I'm just curious quickly. Feel free to talk as much as you want about it. But I'm just curious as an aside of what your experience was with Mac OS 10. What was like the first version you remember using, etc.
Oh. So I remember using Mac OS 10.0.
Okay, yep.
So that was the very first kind of experience of that was on the Wall Street G3. Okay. And it was garbage. Yep. It really, absolutely, like from going from like OS 9.1, which was just beautifully fast. Everything just worked. And then suddenly you're onto Mac OS 10. You're like, right, okay, and boot. And you're waiting for 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes. It's still kind of like churning through it. And then you get into it and everything is laggy. It's slow. Yeah. It's resource intensive. It is just not playing nice. You can't play DVDs either.
There were so many little things that people forget that you had, and one, it was either the public beta or 10.0. You had to reboot if you changed your network settings. It was just like these weird things that you just would not imagine a Mac needing to do.
Yeah, it was infuriating to use, and it was like, okay, nice concept. I mean, if it was like a demo or like a Mac Expo or something, you'll be like, oh yeah, you've got some cool ideas here. Come back in 5 years when it's ready. And then, yeah, I think I managed to, on the G3, I really tried. I tried to use Mac OS 10. I think I had 10.2 on there, and I was like, no, I'm not going to reboot into OS 9. I'm not going to reboot into OS 9. I've got to try and, oh, what do you mean it's crashed again? Oh, okay, no, reboot into Mac OS 10? No, it's fine. It's fine. I'm going to try it again. And like everything was, it was like trying to nail jelly to a wall. Trying to, like, okay, can you do a thing? I've done a thing.
Not that thing.
Yeah, exactly. And there was just nothing in the way of software that I used or wanted to use that worked with Mac OS 10
You'd
as
have
well.
to launch Classic.
Everything was still geared towards the Classic OS. So after that point, I didn't really kind of go back to Mac OS 10 until actually I did have a Core 2 Duo, one of the earliest A11A MacBook with, I think it was like 4 gig of RAM or something. It was okay. You know, I got it with a busted screen, replaced the screen. I had a cheap MacBook to use, and that was with Mac OS 10.4, and it was like complete different experience. You know. Because the OS hadn't gotten much more complicated since 10.2, and so I just seen the cost. You just have to type sudo for nail jelly to wall. Sudo nail jelly to wall. You know,
with great power comes great responsibility.
Yes. So the difference between like 10.2 and 10.4 was like the vague UI change. I think they went to the brushed from Aqua. And it looked more polished. It felt more polished. And then you've also got gobs more system resources. I mean, this thing's like CPU's like 10 times faster than that preceded it. I've got 4, 5, 6 times the amount of memory that the G3 ever had in it. The hard drive was 6 times the size. Yeah, everything was just, you had all the resources, and the operating system was not much more complicated than 10.2. Yeah. So it felt snappy, like running System 6 on an SE.
Yeah, I remember the Jaguar 10.2 is really when I and I think a lot of other Apple users really felt, okay, it's getting to a point where now it's almost fully usable. I don't have to use Classic as much. A lot of developers had applications out at that point, but 10.0 and 10.1 were really excellent concepts, but like you said, it was like, hey, come back in 5 years and show us where you are. I mean, a lot of people love Tiger looking back, because it was the first one on Intel. It had a very long lifespan of updates and everything. And to this day, I have a Mac Mini running right under this monitor that runs Tiger, because it does Apple Talk, it talks to the old machines, it does a lot of things that I needed to do without sort of getting in the way. So it's interesting to hear your thoughts of how you experienced the Mac and then you came back to it later, because a lot of folks I know their first experience was like when Macs went to Intel. They did not have that experience previous.
I mean, the thing that I would liken it to most of all would be when Microsoft Windows Vista came out and it was being pushed on hardware that clearly was not capable of it. And I remember trying. I'm very good at the time Vista came out. I was running an AMD Opteron machine, like an Opteron socket 939. I think it was the 146 single processor, then the 170, which was the dual processor 2 gigahertz one. And I was running Windows XP 64-bit just because it was so obscure.
Oh yeah.
Things still run on it, but do I have to bother with an antivirus? Nope, because nothing runs in 64-bit user space virus-wise yet. And it was just, again, that was fast. It was snappy. It was very light on system resources. I had at the time it was 2 gigs of RAM in 2004, 2005. That was a lot of memory back then. And then suddenly it was like, well, I'll give Vista a whirl, 64-bit Vista Ultimate, I think it was. Installed that, and it was literally on my machine for all of 6 hours before I formatted the driver. Nope, XP64 is going back on there. No, I'm not dealing with this anymore, because it was using so much memory, and it was sitting at the desktop. And it's sitting at the desktop doing nothing and just eating all of my my system resource. And obviously, in hindsight, the memory management model they'd switched to is very different. Such as it would just allocate everything, all your memory, and then release it as it wanted. And coming from an experience, like, no, you may not have my RAM. Go away. Yeah. But also the fact that it was pinging the CPU. There was issues with the sound. The graphics was sluggish and just jerky. And yeah, exactly. Yeah, as Neil said, let me use all of your resources to index your drive.
Yeah.
Whereas on XP64, it's like drive indexing. No, we turn that stuff off by default. It was, again, that was like how Mac OS was. I mean, they both had flaws.
Yeah.
It was a case of like great concept, but really just you're pushing it out the door too early. You need to refine it.
Yeah, and that was exactly my experience with Vista. I actually, I think it was 2007 or 2008. I built a PC for games, and I was like, I need to install Vista because my graphics card just did not support XP. It was too buggy. It would freeze and everything. And so I had a very interesting experience with Vista at the time as well. Unfortunately, it lasted.
Interesting experience.
Yeah, it lasted.
It usually comes down to a lot of swearing, frustration, things being thrown across the room. May or may not include the computer.
But basically disabling everything that made Windows Vista until it was like slightly usable and tolerable for me just playing games and screaming at my opponents and being a teenager.
I mean, going through the entire service list and just going, nope, don't need that. Do I want themes on top? Do I want to use a quarter of my GPU memory?
Yeah.
Nope.
And I remember it was funny because I built this PC and then I had the sudden realization I have XP, but I don't know if that's going to support all the hardware because I had a Core 2 quad and all this stuff, and that was supposedly 64-bit and everything. And they had a promotion at the time, at least here in the U.S., that for if you were a small business, and so I signed up my father's thing instead, if you were a small business, you could get a copy of Windows Vista Ultimate if you watched like 6 or 7 hours of these training webinars. So you had to have a PC to view these training webinars, and I didn't really have a PC. I had my Intel iMac. So what I did was I opened up Parallels Desktop, ran Windows XP, I watched those seminars, and you couldn't fast forward, so I just minimized the whole VM, and I basically forgot about it. And a few weeks later in the mail, I get an envelope from Microsoft. I said, what the heck is this? It's a copy of Windows Vista in there. So I'm like, okay, that's perfect.
It's like, oh, lovely, I'm 3 months.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like AOL.
I think that disc was used once.
As you would an AOL
yeah,
CD.
Exactly. But yeah, so that was my experience with that. But before we dive into the SE, because I know we're going to talk about that for a while, I'm just curious. Your collection, assuming you have one, of vintage computers, is there anything you're particularly satisfied with, or you sort of keep a very small list of machines, maybe?
Oh, okay. So I have a bit of a problem. Some might say I have an addiction.
I would have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, so last year when everything went into lockdown and we moved out of the office, I'm in IT support for the company I currently work at, and essentially I was bringing most of our stock home. So I didn't have a lounge. I had a stock room with a couch in it. And earlier, just before Christmas last year, like, right, well, we're the new office, we can move stuff into there. And unfortunately, in between moving everything from the office to here and moving everything from here back to the office again, it's like, how many classic Macs do I now have on my lounge table? 1, 2, 3, a half. Well, let's get half. Oh, no, there's a Power Mac 6100 in the corner over there. Oh, and an Apple CD. When did I get that? Oh, and a zip drive. It's like, it multiplies. It's like leaving like headphone cables in a drawer. Nice and neatly folded. God, I just got 2 compact Macs and they've red. They've just appeared out of nowhere.
They do that. They do that.
Largely in part due to, the SE rebuild project. But that's not all. Funnily enough, actually, Neil has a large chunk of my retro collection.
He's keeping it warm.
He ended up doing a lovely. He did a lovely 2-part video on the SGI Octane.
Oh yes, I saw that one.
So I was again, happy Retro Santa featured in that one as well. Who was it that called me Retro Santa earlier on? I think that was Cyprian. But yeah. So what else have I sort of donated as well? I donated like an SGI Indie, because one of the things that I absolutely love and want to get hold of like more of to do is like vintage Unix workstations are like real high-end stuff that out of the realm of mere mortals, only ever seen in movies or in the corner of a computer lab that only like the third years are allowed to access, that sort of stuff. So, I've had like SparkStation IPXs and SparkStation 5s and stuff beforehand. But yeah, so SGI Indie, SGI Octane, I've obviously got the Amiga 500 Plus down there. I've got more compact Macs than I know what to do with at this point. But at the same time, so many of them are SE30s. I'm like, no, mine. You can't take this from me.
You got to hold on to those.
They're so rare. It's really hard to find. Really, really is difficult to find like decent vintage Mac stuff here. I mean, there was one, I think it was like an LC3 up for sale, for example, and there was like, LC3 with a monitor and a keyboard and mouse used by a little old lady for Claris Works or whatever. Only like £799. And you're like, are you hot? It's just like, fair enough.
Free capacitor leakage with every purchase,
Yeah. You're like, okay, 100 quid? Yeah, can easily see it. 200 quid? You're pushing it. 300 is like a flat out no. But then randomly from time to time, you will come across a listing that the most beautiful listings, the ones in the wrong category.
Oh, yes.
That are misspelled, that have like crap descriptions and like one photo. And you're like, I will take a punt on that because it's better than nothing. Like I did that with an SE30 that was actually only in Hastings, about 30, 40 miles around the coast from here. And, fully expecting it to be like battery bombed or dead or just a chassis. And it was fine. There was nothing wrong with it. No cap leakage. That had a 1989 battery in it that hadn't exploded, that still held a charge. Okay, have I just like won the lottery or something? Because this just doesn't happen.
Yeah, is this a hidden camera show?
Yeah, this thing had a dead hard drive, so I was like, okay, so it's not just. Oh, okay, so there's something wrong with it. That's fine, I can live with that. And then I forgot about it. I forgot that I'd ordered it. So it arrived, put it in a box, put it in the spare room. Like, right, okay, it's in there. I'll get around to that and I'll deal with it. 4 weeks have gone by. Completely forgotten. I bought it, and I was having a look on eBay. And, it's an SE30. I'll get that one as well. So it happened.
Now you have a friend for it.
And don't get me started on Bayi. That's So that's.
Yeah, I don't think we have that one here, thankfully. So.
That's the extent of my collection for now, I suppose.
Excellent.
And notice I say for now, because there's always room for expansion.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope. I mean, I started with just the few machines that I had in my youth, but it's interesting to see people's perspective who are just getting into vintage Macs now, because 15, 20 years ago, nobody wanted anything to do with, well, I'd maybe say 25 years ago now, speaking of time going by, but nobody wanted anything to do with vintage Macs. If it was 68K, if it was an early power PC, I got a Quadra 840AV for $5. These insane things, and people they just wanted to get rid of them. They had no value, and there's just a wave of, as we were talking about before, of now people are getting into them, and the stuff has been scrapped or it's been e-wasted, and there's not a lot of these things out there as there were. I'm not saying there aren't. You could still find deals like you were saying of, just someone saying, hey, I know what this is. Here it is. I misspelled Macintosh, and here it is on eBay for a sizable discount. But Yeah, I think the deals are still out there, but it's just very strange for me to see some of these things that I know I've bookmarked on eBay or I've watched on eBay when it was like $50 or $100. Oh, that's cool. And I don't need to spend $50 on that. And then I go and look in eBay saying, oh, by the way, that listing is still up. It's only $679, but the seller gave you a 5% discount. Do you want to accept that? I'm like, when did this happen?
I mean, I think obviously, the whole thing of retro has kind of really taken off because people that, when they were of the age where they were really wanting to kind of play with this stuff, we were too young to be able to afford any of it. And now we can. People just take advantage. And it doesn't matter whether it's Mac, whether it's Amiga, whether it's Atari, whatever the kind of like niche is, there's people out there just trying to just sell it for as much as they can get for it now.
Yeah.
And
I understand that.
It's going to be like that for a while.
That's not the funds that I have to dispose at this time with these lovely items, however lovely they may be.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, cool. So thank you for divulging into all my geeky questions about Macs, because when you see a man wearing a Rainbow Apple logo, you just have to ask him all those questions.
I had this specially made for anybody that like, wants one of these shirts. You can't buy them. Well, you can, but you don't. You have to go and get them made yourself. So there's a company in the UK called Workwear Express. You can send them like the Photoshop PSD of what you want. So I just did Apple Garamond and the original Apple logo and just sort of like slapped, Macintosh SE reverse engineering team on there. They're like, okay, I want that embroidered on a shirt. And it came through and it looked really good. And it's a nice polo shirt as well. So I thought one of the things I would do for the contributors of the, to the SE project, well, why not get some of these made up in everybody else's size, which is why I was going around like saying, hey, what size shirt do you take? And I was like, why? Why do you want to know? And I'm like, no reason.
Wink. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Well, so we were talking a little bit about the Macintosh SE before, so let's, I guess, dive right into the heart of the matter here. So you had the naive thought of, oh, how hard could it be to reverse engineer the Macintosh SE? And obviously it's a great machine to start with. It has some expandability because you have that PDS slot, although that PDS slot is different from the Macintosh SE30's PDS slot. You do have some expandability there. And it was one of the more popular machines at the time. So can you just talk a little bit about, when you started that project and sort of, I know it's been a long journey. Maybe some of the people that have helped you out, and wherever you want to begin is fine. I know we're going to be talking about this for a while.
Well, what kind of really got me into the project in the first place was, so Adrian Black did a repair-a-thon on a whole bunch of classic Macs around about the beginning of last year. And again, this is one of those things where you see these completely destroyed Macintosh Classic boards. And you think, well, surely this is a perfect candidate for the kind of like reverse engineering that, Rob Taylor and, John Hurtle were doing at the time. There we go.
Here's an SE30 board that has seen better days.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, actually, you've got some great images of the battery bond SE.
Let's go to that. So if we could find that 1 second here, let's fumble around as you keep talking. Here we go. So we're gonna show this first image here, and so this is of a Macintosh SE that has well, it's seen better days.
The worst Mactel bomb thing I've ever seen.
Really?
Yeah, this was like all the way to the memory slots at the front. The SIMs in those slots corroded. I tried to get them out, and they literally just crumbled because just the alkali had spread all across the board, and it ripped up almost all of the traces. It ate off half of the legs of the CPU. There was virtually nothing salvageable from that board, except for the BBU, which is absolutely fine, the glue, the ADB, and the real-time clock chip. Even the sound chip on that board, that did not come off. That was wrecked.
So I'm gonna go to the second picture here, which if anybody has sensitive stomachs, turn away from the television screen, because so there's the processor, or what was left of it.
I do rather like that. The creme brulee FE edition. Just get a little blowtorch on there, a little bit of sugar.
Delicious.
Your creme brulee.
So yeah, this is a close up of the processor, and you could definitely see. I mean, I'm gonna just switch back to the previous picture here, but you could see there's like the wave of how this has progressed through the board there, of just whatever angle this machine was on did not help it, obviously, but you could just see how destructive these could be.
So I just said, lasagna.
Yeah, definitely not anything exactly. I want to eat.
So, I mean, it was a kind of like a far cry from sort of seeing Adrian Black like go through all of these and thinking, oh well, okay, there's some damage. It looks like severe, but not so severe that you couldn't reverse engineer from it. I mean, yeah, it's probably too far gone to repair it, but it's a great candidate to get started from. So I started looking for like a classic Mac or something that suffered from this problem as a kind of, I think, just as a proof of concept more than anything else, to prove that it could be done. That it wasn't like, oh, well, it's a Mac and they're all really difficult. And they're not like an 8-bit or a 16-bit micro. It's far more involved than that. Oh, you couldn't possibly hope to. And I was like, no, it's got to be possible. It has to be possible. I want to give it a go. And that's where I stumbled across like the SE. And the SE was, I think it was 48 euros from Spain. And yeah, again, it looked like that internally. And actually, when I opened it up, it was like, yes, okay, this is exactly what I wanted.
Yeah, because it's
like, I don't want a working one. I want one that's crap.
Exactly. What more damage can you do to it? It's not working right now. Yeah.
If I break it, oh no. Matthew, yes, it is a multi-layer PCB. So originally the thought was, because it was a through-hole board, that it would actually just be a simple, top and bottom layer. It wasn't, but the multi-layer portion of it is actually far simpler than you think. So the top layer of the board is mixed signal and power with regards to the 12-volt, negative 12-volt rails. The other side is signal and I believe negative 12-volt as well for the audio circuitry and the Sony sound chip. Everything in the middle two layers, you've got one which is just a sheet of copper, and that's your ground plane, and a full sheet of copper which is just the power plane, and they are only connected to either VCC or ground of the individual chips. So again, on there, so what you're seeing on the underside of that board is, so that's most of the signal traces. And actually, if you hold it up to the light, you can see along the bottom as well, there's a difference. They've split the ground plane at the back. So you can kind of see it kind of snakes its way along the back through the middle of the filter. So if you go lower down to where the filters are, Steve, at the back I/O. There we go. Yeah. So there, that was where you can see the split ground plane as well. And actually, if you were to look at some of those pins that the chips connect to, for example, if you know that a particular chip has a VCC or a ground pin, you look at that pin and you can see a tiny little cross, and you can see that connects to the plane. Now with stripping these boards down, it's easy to verify if you've got an orbital sander. If not, then it's a case of get your sanding block out and you need a forearm like Popeye. Well, you get one by the end of it. Actually, hammering away at this thing. And then you get down about 0.6 millimeters, 0.8 millimeters, and then you start to see bare copper. And you expect, is it going to be like a grid of actual interconnections? Is it going to be mixed signal on this? It's not. It is just a solid sheet of copper that's only connected to ground or power. That's it. There's no signal on those inner layers.
So the original SE has 4 layers, correct?
4 layers, yeah. But then actually, the original Macintosh had 4 layers, and again, for the exact same reason. Because there was too many traces and too much signal interference going on in such a tight space that rather than kind of routing power and ground over the top and the bottom and then really cramming things in, actually just split the board out. Yeah, sure, it makes the board more expensive, but you can then do more in the space that you do have and makes routing a lot easier.
Okay, cool. Wow. I mean, you make it sound simple, but...
Well, that's the thing. It's hard to think of it any other way now, just because I've been sort of I'm steeped like a tea bag in the font of all SE knowledge at this point.
So that was one of the challenges, was obviously starting to understand how the board was constructed. So I guess your
Mhm.
thought process probably started as trying to understand the chips on the board, the components, and everything. Where do you want to go from next? You know, obviously there's a lot of steps involved, and you know the process better than I do.
Okay, well, I mean, if you want, I can detail the exact process
Sure.
and strip down of an SE board. So essentially, you start with actually, I've got one down here. I can a demonstrator.
Sure. You might need to
Again,
turn your blur
another.
off, just in case.
Oh yeah, no, I need to turn it off. In fact, actually, I'll tilt the camera down so you can kind of see
Perfect.
it in a bit more light, and I'll turn the blur filter off. Okay, there we go. So there we go. So this is a Macintosh SE board, and you can see this one is wrecked. The battery's like been at this one as well. I've actually like harvested both the glue and the ADB chips from this. But essentially, you start out with a board like this. You've got to remove everything, and when I say everything, I mean every last component. Now, because you don't necessarily need to keep everything, you can be kind of destructive about this. You can, be a bit ruthless. I mean, obviously, it's nice if you can save the 68K because, although they're pretty cheap still, the supplies aren't going to last forever. So things like this, you got to keep. Things like the 85, the 8530, you don't need to worry about. Zilog still makes this. These are still sold on Mouser for £6 each. They're not much at all. Then you've got the Sony sound chip, so harvest that one, if you can. The 26LS30 chip, there's only one of them. The LS32s are still available from Mouser. The LS30 went out of production about 6 or 7 years ago, but you can still find them really dirt cheap on places like UT Source, for example. Obviously, harvest the ROMs, harvest the Swim chip. They're all socketed anyway. They're really easy to get out. Harvest the BU. And then it's just, so you're left with the other custom chips, which is the glue, the ADB, and like the VIA chip, which is on every single Mac SE branded with the Apple part number 338-6523. Now that was a bit of a puzzling one because although every other Mac board up until that point had used the 65C22 VIA chip, suddenly this one's using a custom Apple part. And you're like, oh, okay, is this going to be a custom Apple part? Because MOS did actually, there was a part, the 6523 was called the tri-port interface.
Okay.
It was the VIA with another port added and a few features removed that weren't going to be used. So again, the running theory at the time was, oh, maybe it's one of those. I mean, it's a 40-pin DIP package, the voltage pin and the ground pin, match, and you're seeing stuff which should go out to like port A, port B. So that was like the running theory for a long time until I discovered actually it's just Apple being Apple and obfuscating a part number and trying to hide that it is just a commodity off-the-shelf 65C22. Wow. So again, you don't need to worry about that. The Western Design Center still sells them. You can buy them on Mouser, £6 each. You don't need to harvest it. But anyway, so once you strip the board of everything useful, such as, if you can, the PDF, the inductors, you need to save the inductors, and you need to save the 19-pin floppy ports. They are not available.
Yeah, I think the individual making the floppy MU actually commissioned a company to make brand new of these little ports here, and he's not giving them away. He's using them all for his projects. Makes sense.
See, a couple of people kind of like pointed me in the direction of like the Atari ST forums because they use the same.
Oh yes.
Well, the Atari ST as well, and so the Exos store actually has a couple of like these available. But obviously, if you can save your existing one, that's the route you should go. If you can't go any other way, then it's going to have to be like try and find one somewhere if you can, or maybe cut down a 25 pin or something. It'll be a bit janky, or just run it out to a header instead.
Yeah.
So anyway, you strip the board. You've got to be completely like down to nothing, to the point where you're at. Actually, no, not even that one. I've got a classic board I might be able to use as an example.
We could use our imagination.
So here we go. This is a completely stripped classic board. Nice. There is nothing on there, no surface mount stuff at all. It was all swept away with the aid of like hot air, and that took about 4 hours to strip completely. So you want to get to the point where you are at bare board state. You place this, or the SE board, in my case, on a flatbed scanner.
Mm-hmm.
You scan it in both sides, front side and back side, at 1200 DPI. The reason for this is because when you load it up in Sprint, it's a one-to-one recreation, and it fits almost perfectly. You don't need to do any resizing of the image. Be like the actual size that you need. So you take the board and then you load it into Sprint. Now, might I go ahead and share my screen and show the joy of Sprint?
Yeah, we could try to figure that out. Let's get that to work here.
Okay, so let me turn my video off for a moment.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to try and he's going to share his screen here. Just going to give us a second to select the box and everything. So I see his screen currently, and so I'm just adjusting it on my side here. And we should be good in 1 second, Kai. Let me just scale this up a little bit. Make sure we're not cropping anything. Okay, there we go. So let me make sure if you say something, I'll see if the audio bounces.
Okay, am I still here?
Yes, hello? You are still there. Excellent.
Excellent. Yay, I'm not being dropped. Okay, good. Okay, so this is the completed Macintosh SE Reloaded board. So if I start stripping stuff away layer-wise, so you can kind of get a bit of a better feel for it. Let's eliminate those. Silkscreen on the back, the front, silkscreen on the top, and let's select the outline layer. So, okay, there's nothing there other than an outline at this point. This is the first thing you need to do. You need to draw the outline of the board. Make sure that it is the right dimensions. You can see it up the top here. You've got your millimeter scale. So you want to measure the board physically first, and then what you do is this little button up here. This board loads in your scanned copy. So your board side, top and bottom. You tell it the resolution, and you might need to sort of like shift around the X and Y offset just to get it kind of properly centered on the screen.
Okay.
But once you do, you should end up with like an image like this. This is what you should see displayed. So first things first, you've got to draw the outline of the board so that you've got a good starting point of where to put mounting holes, for example. Once you've done that, then it's a simple matter of placing components. And this is one of the brilliant things about Sprint is you can just go to the menu on the left. Let's go from SMD to, say, through hole, and then DIL or DIP packages. So say you've got like a 40-pin DIP. You just select the 40-pin DIP, 600 width. And then you could see it down there, orient it the right way that you want it. So that's the SDC. Click, and then just drag.
Wow.
And then you just lay it over the top, over the top of like the scanned copy, and you just keep dragging and dropping until you've got all of the components placed.
Now, did you have to create those? Did you have to create those components manually, or there's a library you choose from, or?
Most of these, no. Well, this macro library here is just everything you need. I mean, it's got the DIN 41612 in there, the Type C 3x32.
Okay.
You don't need to create any. The only thing I needed to create was the sim stuff. But because they're 30 pins, it just came through as like a 30-pin SIP header. So you drag 2 of those into the spot, you draw the silk screen box around it, select all of the components. So, so there's like those parts there. You just right click, and then you select component, and then you build a custom component for the board. Now, because you only need 2 of them, all you have to do is, just copy paste onto the board. But if you wanted to make it a macro, you can save that. If you want, and you can, just drag it into your user macros, and there you go. You've got a permanently saved copy of a sim slot.
Wow.
But almost every other component on this board is literally just straight out of the library. If you need to create something like the Molex MiniFit Junior power plug, for example, that's created from going to, say, pad, and you select, you want circular, and you want to make sure it's a through pad so that it actually has copper on the other side. And then you select your width on here, so say 2.54 millimeter spacing, and then pad, and then you just place pad, and then make sure the spacing is accurate. And you can use the measuring tool in here to measure from the beginning of there to the beginning of there. So you go 5.56 millimeter. That's 2 lots of 2.54. So again, go back to pad tool, drop down, pad. Create a silkscreen box around it. Right click, build component. Ta-da! You got a custom component. It's so intuitive to use script. It really is very easy. So even if you do need to create a custom component that's not available in the library, so for example, if I zoom down here, you can see the I/O connectors. Mm-hmm. So you've got the serial ports there, for example. They're Mini DIN 8. They weren't in the library, so I ended up having to create the component specifically for it. Yeah. But also with these ones, it wasn't just a case of I'll just place the pad. I'm also having to use the track tool and outline mode to build a semicircle and then another semicircle, and then join them together to make an oval to make the cutout for the pad, and then do that again on excuse me, the top copper layer with a thicker outer band to create the actual pad.
Wow. You make it sound easy.
It is. Honestly, I'm not even kidding. It is actually really easy to use, which is one of the reasons why I was so surprised that no one had kind of given this a go yet. Yeah. This was, by the end of, I think, day 2, I'd had both layers fully mapped out.
Oh, wow.
Every component on there, and almost every single trace, at least in the initial stage, available and on the board. Obviously, there's plenty more tweaking that you do afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
For a basic layout, it was done in 2 or 3 days, and that's 2 or 3 days of doing other things during the day and just going back to it in the evening.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. So this whole process is essentially for those of you who are like me and you just have a gloss over your eyes and your jaw is just dropping to the floor right now. This is essentially trying to trace all of the pathways, all the vias, all the traces, all the positions of those original components of that Macintosh SE board into a digital file there that you could then do so much more with.
Yeah, it's essentially it's like digital tracing paper, or essentially just Xeroxing the board, mm-hmm. but manually by hand rather than kind of relying on any kind of automation to do it.
Now, is obviously there's a lot you could see on the board, and we were talking about layers before. Were there any not to get ahead of things, if you want to cover this later, please feel free to do so, but were there any particular things that you were unable to determine based on the front and back view here that kind of puzzled you?
Initially, it was the inner layers and what the inner layers are doing. So if I actually switch to just showing everything at this point, this shows all of the layers in an X-ray. If I switch to, say, the inner layer, so this is the ground plane. Okay. If I take off all of the other signals, all of the other kind of silk screen from the back, so there we go. We've got a pretty good idea of what's kind of going on here. So as you can see, this is what the inner layer of the ground plane looks like. It's a sheet of just pure copper that only exists to tie together the ground pins of the components of the board. Okay, if I zoom into a section, say like the BBU, for example, then you can actually see. So pin 1 is actually connected to this layer.
Oh, I see. But
then this pin is as well, and then this pin, and this pin. There's 4 grounds on them, and some of the ones that are next to it, you can see the slightly different colorations. Mm-hmm. That shows that they're on a different layer. So if I hide that, there we go. I hide that layer. It completely disappears. So you can see just from this layer, right, what's ground, what is power. This was through trial and error. A lot of it was a lot of it was done with a multimeter because for the most part, going through this, there were no schematics for the SE that were found at all. They just didn't exist anywhere. The Beaumark ones, the only ones available for the Macintosh SE were a really, really awful scanned copy that was so blurry in places you just couldn't read it. And it was only page 1 of 4.
Oh, yeah.
So
that's what's so frustrating about trying to fix them.
Well, yeah, I mean, you get an idea of like, okay, well, you've got these are obviously pull-up resistors. Even though I can't necessarily see the values of them, I can look at the board, I can look at the resistor color code, and I can see, okay, that's a 33 or a 3.3K resistor, and one end of it goes here. So okay, so that end's going to ground. So you know that's ground at that point. So once you know something is ground, it is just about, okay, one end of the multimeter permanently connected to the ground pin and the main power connector, or where it would go on the board, and then toning out, like, hey, where does this one go? Where does this one go? And this was done at a time when, so for example, you see here R38. That looks like it's floating because it's not connected to the ground plane, so it's solely used for signal. If on the top or the bottom layers there was no trace, there was a trace going in but nothing coming out, the other end had to be connected to either power or ground. So it was a case of, right, okay, well, is it on ground plane? No, it's not. Okay, test it on the power plane. Is it connected there? Yes, it is. There we go. So we then know which layer to connect which side to. And a lot of the capacitors on here as well, they're decoupling capacitors. So it is literally going to be running, okay, positive to negative next to the CPU. That's it. That's about as simple as it gets.
So this obviously, I'm looking at this from a repair perspective of recapping boards with bad traces and all this stuff, and I think, my goodness, you have a map that is almost better than the schematic in some points, because I could actually visually see, in comparison to how the board looks, oh, that connects to this, that connects to that. Wow, that's where the ground is and all this stuff. I mean, I'm just geeking out over that aspect, but. This is truly fantastic.
There's more. Okay, so say you want to see what something is connected to.
Oh yes, there we go.
So let's bring back the actual copper layers here. So we got blue is your top, and purple is the bottom layer. And you're thinking, what pin on the BBU does what? Where does this one go? Okay, there's a via there. Where does that go? Oh, look, you can use the test function, and it will show you exactly what gears it's connected to, what pins it's connected to, and it gives, oh, look, there we go. Yeah, bus error. That's the bus error pin on the 68K.
That is beautiful.
And it goes, boom, there we go, straight up to that via there. That's the address strobe. And it shows you where it's going through a via and doing the transition between the bottom layer and the top layer. And what it's connected to, and look, it's gone in there, but there's no room, so it's kind of looping back around between the gaps between the resistors, back down through another gap between the 68K, all the way down here, and it's linking in with the swim chip, and it's linking through to the PDS connector in 2 places, and then right back again to the address strobe pin.
You don't have your video, my video up on your screen, but I have the stupidest, biggest smile on my face right now, because this is just amazing. This is just any repair person's dream of, hey, I wonder where that goes to, and you have an electronic way to find out with this work that you've done. That is just blows my mind.
I mean, I know that I gave this Sprint layout copy out on 68K MLA. Anybody can download this. It is in the thread. You can, if you want to go and get your own boards made, it's great. It's all there. All the jobs are there. All the layouts are there. Everything. And I told Bruce at Branches Creations, like, hey, go and download Sprint. Here's the Sprint layout file. And I got a very excited, 8-year-old schoolboy on Christmas kind of message from him on Discord. Going, oh my God, this is so amazing. So, yeah, it is a very, very handy tool. And you can kind of see, when everything is kind of connected together. This is actually one of the tools where I realized, in one of several board revisions, I was like, okay, why isn't this working? Why is this not powering up? And it was again because I'd made a small mistake on the address strobe pin, and I'd connected it in the PDS connector. I connected it to the wrong one, and it was bridging the address strobe with address line 8. So it wasn't doing anything. It was just sitting there in this like loop of like, I don't know what to do. But it was, again, because of this tool, I was like, right, okay, let's tone out. Like, what does this pin do? What does this pin do? Where's this one going? Is that connected to what it should be connected to?
Yeah.
Is it cascading through everything correctly? Like is it the FCT 245s? For the RAM access. Okay, what about the reset lines? Where are they all going? Are all the clock lines connected correctly? And what resistors are they connected to? Are they on pull-ups? Are the pull-ups connected and on the other side of things correctly? So it's just a fantastic tool to be able to do this.
Oh, definitely.
Even if it's not 100% correct in the first place, because you get you could reverse engineer the schematic from this.
Yeah.
Because you know what it's connected to and what resistors, what LS logic, what ROMs, etc.
That is amazing. I mean, I'm still in awe. This is so cool.
So
with
the test tool.
yeah. So that is. Oh wow. Yeah, I'm just looking at all the different. Wow.
It gets a bit busy around the BBU here, and this is where like, because when you're doing it, you're hand routing. I'll just give you an example. I'll lay down a track. So a track. You choose your track width. I've got 0.2 millimeters. By default, I want to do 0.25, but most fabs now can do 0.2 fairly easily. And then it's just a matter of like select track, connect it to one pin, click on one end, and then it's just drag. Depending on which way you go, it automatically wants to move to help you. Like, you want to go through there, you want to go through there. If I change the grid size, for example, to like down to 3.125 mil, and do it again, you can kind of see it's a bit more, it's less jerky. There's more grid points that it can kind of go through, and it can be a bit more precise. So if I wanted to, I could get right between, say, these two pads here. So I line it up with the middle of the two pads. I click just to make sure I'm changing direction, and then go all the way through the middle of those, and then click again, and then out here, and then out here. Yeah, so you it's really, really intuitive. Get rid of that just in case the production extra trace on the ground plane. But you see what I mean? It's really easy to kind of like place tracks, place pads, and going between top and bottom again is very, very easy. You just switch between, okay, am I doing this on copper layer 1? Am I doing it on copper layer 2? So you would do this board. If I zoom out, you would do copper layer 1, the top of the board. Flip to the bottom of the board, do all the traces there, and then you work out, okay, what's not connected, what is being missed out on the top and the bottom. Okay, voltage, grounds. These are the things that are being missed out. This is where that's where you then add those, in on the layers. And one of the other things that was done as well, and again, this is thanks to Tech Night actually on the 68K MLA forums. The first couple of board revisions, I really wasn't understanding what was going wrong here. I had the split ground here, so you can see the split power and ground plane. Now that's for reduction of RF interference. You could probably get away with it these days. It doesn't run fast enough to really be affected by like random RF interference, unless you're standing right next to it with a 300-watt radio, for example. And I couldn't understand why, when the inductors were connected and the rear power plane was powered up, something was bridging between power and ground. I was like, well, what on earth is it? I'm going through all of the pins on the 53C80 SCSI. I'm going through all of the filter chips. I well, no, they're all correctly grounded. Nothing else is connected where it shouldn't be. Until he pointed out these things, these little lugs here, these solder lugs on the board for the metal bracket soldered in. That I had not put an exclusion around. So when when you got these bits were connected through every single layer, top layer, middle layer, bottom layer. The whole stack was being short-circuited, together. And it was actually Technic figured that out in about 10 minutes, and that's another reason why you need another set of eyes. Because after looking at this sort of stuff for like hours and then kind of going, no. After doing that, your eyes go really funny.
Oh, I can't even imagine.
It's like, have you ever looked at the sun and you look away and suddenly you've just got this green blob floating in front? Yeah, it's like that. These things haunt my dreams. Okay.
I can't even imagine. I mean, I go dizzy trying to fix a trace here and there, and there's obviously the same fatigue you get is. I've been staring at this for 4 or 5 weeks in a row. I need to put it on the shelf and take a break.
Yeah. And that's where like a lot of other people in the community kind of like really jumped in to help. Like I really can't thank Hack Shack enough for his assistance. With this. If I go ahead and stop sharing my screen now.
Just don't forget to put your camera back on.
Yeah, there we go. My terrifying
Excellent.
face is here.
Oops. There we go. I see your tools. Now we see you.
Tools of the trade. Yeah. The Vera chip lifter that was ridiculously expensive for what it is. I should have just taken a regular screwdriver, bent it, and then stuck an angle grinder in the end of it. It would have been cheaper.
So we had a few questions. I didn't want to interrupt you while you were just amazing all of us here. And I know you may get to some of these, but one question I had first was you mentioned some of the chips you obviously want to salvage from the board while you're obviously trying to build a working machine with your recreation board.
Yeah.
And so I know a lot of those chips were a bit of a mystery. When we were talking the other day, you talked a little bit about the ADB chip and sort of the process of that. Do you want to just elaborate on that a little bit? I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the ADB chip in the Mac SE is unique in the fact that it, unlike every other machine, because it was one of the first machines to ever have ADB. Yep. Apple, had no CUDA. They had no, integrated ADB and RTC and everything kind of chip yet. So everything was split out. And luckily, somebody had already mentioned the fact that the chip itself was a microchip PIC microcontroller. If you actually look at an ADB chip, like your SE board that you've got there, yep. Steve, if you actually have a look at the ADB chip, it may even say microchip copyright on it.
Is this the one right behind there, or is it elsewhere?
So if you look, it should actually be labeled on the board. So okay. So it's the one immediately behind the oscillator, the 18-pin dip.
Oh, I'm looking at the wrong spot here. So is it a square one or a rectangular one?
So where the oscillator is, you got 15.6672 megahertz oscillator there. Yep. So it's right behind. It's immediately behind that. So from top to bottom, you got oscillator, and the one behind it is the ADB. Okay. So that chip go up. There we go. Yeah, so it's a bit dusty on the top of it.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, but anyway, that chip there, that is the ADB. So this is Apple's very first sort of attempt at ADB. It's a very simple protocol. Everything in ADB spec can fit inside 512 bytes of ROM. And that's exactly what that ADB chip is. It's not a dedicated, customized part. Apple needed something quick and available off the shelf from a commodity manufacturer that was available in large quantities. So what they did was they went to Microchip and they said, hey, you do a mask ROM version of a PIC 16 CR54, or a PIC 16 C54 called the 16 CR54. And essentially it is just a standard PIC microcontroller with just Apple's own ROM image burned into the ROM at Microchip's fabs.
Wow.
So it's not programmed. It's not programmed as in like you would with a regular PIC and you drop it in a program and you blast your program over it. It is literally etched into the silicon. You cannot read from it. It's read protected. You cannot write anything to that area of ROM. That's it. It's fixed. So going from that, again, it was actually quite easy to kind of figure out, okay, what pins are what? Okay, well, this one is voltage, this one is clock. And then you kind of get an idea of, by going through all of the test pins, you can see kind of where everything kind of goes to, and you get an idea of, okay, well, that's clock in, that's clock out, that's data in. all of these, there's a whole bunch of pins on there that are just unused because they're not needed. It only uses like 2 ports, and that's it.
Wow.
And yeah, it's just ridiculously simple. And then it kind of came along to, well, hang on, the Macintosh Classic is a cost-reduced version of an SE.
Yeah.
The BBU between them is identical. There's no feature changes. The pinout is identical. The only thing that changes is the fact that obviously the Classic only has one ADB port instead of 2. It drops the second floppy drive support as well, which means it can drop the glue chip as well on the board. It implements some stuff with surface mount. Well, because everything is surface mount as well, they can actually implement the functions of the glue that were still needed in discrete logic and still be in a smaller footprint than the glue chip itself. But more importantly, the ADB, because of where it was going to, all the pins on the chip, you can map the pin out to that chip as well. It's like, oh, well, that's clock in, that's clock out, that's data, that's voltage, that's ground.
Wow.
And then you think, hang on, scratch my head here. This chip is exactly the same. Again, all of these are saying microchip on the top of them. All of these are a customized version of the PIC16CR54, just in a PLCC package. So, we've still not necessarily gotten anything out of that yet, but it's very useful to know, because one of the things that I have here is this is an ADB transceiver adapter. So it adapts the PLCC version to DIP that the SE uses.
Oh, wow.
Because the SE was the one to use it, but there are tons of the PLCC versions available, either from salvage boards or from places like UT Source, where these are like $9 each. These ADB transceivers, never used, brand new. Again, surplus from microchip to Apple. Apple bought a lot more in terms of components than they needed, and a lot of them ended up shipping off to like a Hong Kong inventory warehouse.
That is amazing. I mean, it just shows that when you originally took on this project, and you were thinking of how hard it could be, and there were all these folks thinking, that's going to be impossible. There's so much to do, and this and that, and I mean you sort of have to think, the people at Apple who engineered this stuff, we're all human beings. I mean, everyone has their own talents and everything, and obviously it is much easier to engineer it from start to finish than to reverse engineer it. But it is something that I think, especially with the tools and the communities that we have of a little bit, this guy knows a little bit, somebody has experience in this area, someone has torn down this before. I think it's sort of like the perfect storm of, you have these individuals that are willing to collaborate on such an ideal project that you want to set off on. And I mean, rebuilding a classic Macintosh board, whether it's a classic or an SE or an SE30 or anything like that, is just a fantastic endeavor. And I mean, I'm just consistently blown away with the amount of cool things that we're figuring out about how the board was put together, how it communicates and everything, and just obviously the dedication that goes into building it.
I mean, I've just noticed Johan is in chat right now. This guy is just amazing. I mean, this is the guy behind the Commodore CR128 board. Again, a reproduction board that he's done. Well, the really cool thing is he's done a couple of streams on this already, actually using the ADB chip as an example. So what Johan has done is he has taken the ADB chip off an SE board, taken the actual silicon die out of it, and stuck it under a metallurgical microscope, and is essentially stripping the ROM out in terms of, like, okay, let's read the ROM the hard way. So you can see literally every 1 and 0. What's the 1? What's the 0? I believe he's now sent that chip off to John McMasters, who was actually the one that imaged the Apple Swim chip.
Oh, okay.
To actually be able to, like, okay, you want a ROM here? We'll give you a ROM. But this is like binary 1s and 0s etched into the chip that we're extracting that way. Like, oh, okay, so we can't read it, can we? Think again.
We have ways of reading you.
Oh, yeah. Make you talk. There is a stolen microfilm. I'll start with a dodgy accent.
Oh, don't worry. My accents are even more terrible.
Okay, that's right.
So, obviously, so at this stage, we're sort of working chronologically here. You have the layout for the board. You are reverse engineering some of the way these chips communicate with each other. I assume you have some dead SE chips and stuff you are thinking about. So let's, I guess, if it's okay with you, let's think about. So at this point, let's say you have your first version 0 revision of this PCB.
I have
many of them. So the very first
yes,
one.
I do, yeah.
Can you walk us through? You get it obviously manufactured somewhere. You got it delivered to you. What goes on now that you have the first tangible item from your electronic drawing there?
The very first thing that happens is screaming like a little schoolgirl, because it comes out of. So I order everything from JLC PCB, and they've done like every. I used to use PCB Way, but JLC faster, and they just do everything cheaper as well. So you get it through, and you're like, oh my god, I've made a thing.
Yeah, it's here.
It's tangible. It only previously existed on a screen, and now I can look at it. I spent about half an hour just gazing at this thing, like, this is so cool. I've made a thing. Even a couple of people from 68K MLA have obviously taken some of the dead boards, as I like to call them. So this was one of the ones I was really hoping would work. I know the blur filter probably wants to come into it, but so this is wall art. This one does not work.
I will be happy to have that on my wall.
Damn good. But you can have one for the low price of only £20 plus shipping and handling.
I'm happy with that. Send it my way. Sign it first.
So again, you get these boards through, and you look at them, and you want to double check everything that you've done. So you're looking through and you're comparing everything with the sprint layout to the actual board, just going, okay, let's just pick a random area and let's just check, see if the tracks are laid out properly, if they've overlapped something, is the silk screen a little bit blurry, is something out of place, but also test fitting the board into the chassis, because you want to make sure very first thing is the outline correct. Have I got all of the notches in where they should be? The mounting points for the screws. It's the very first thing, because if you haven't got that, you've got to shift everything over on the board. You've got to make sure it's all redrawn, and I haven't got that quite to scale. So you make sure that's done first, and component placement is as exact as you can get it, and then it's a case of you just got to start soldering it.
Yeah.
So you start with the passive components first. So your all of your resistors, all of your decoupling capacitors, your diodes, then just build up in layer from lowest component to tallest component, and only ever install the minimum amount of components you need to a board to test it. So the very first one I did, I soldered everything out of pure excitement. Of course, this is going to work. Soldered everything up, didn't work. Which is why I ended up spending, God knows how long, just desoldering everything again, and just putting it all back in the parts box for the next revision. But once when it's all soldered up and it doesn't work, it's not like, oh well, yeet into the bin with you. You got to get out the multimeter. Okay, what's got power? What hasn't got power? Is everything soldered correctly? Have I got clock? Is there any activity on any of the address lines? Is there any activity on the data lines? Are the ROMs installed the correct way round? With the whole issue of the rear I/O, that was why isn't this working?
Yeah.
And because it's something as simple as an anchor point needed to be excluded from all layers other than the top and the bottom.
And so that was that bug in the first printed revision that you had?
Yeah, that was. So you plug it in and you press the power button and nothing happens, because the power supply is like, no, there's a short. I ain't turning nothing on me.
Are you crazy?
You're getting nothing. You get nothing.
You lose.
Good day, sir. You lose. So after that, it's like, okay, well, that one's obviously a Dove one. Let's go back to the drawing board and quite literally go into sprint, make your changes, double check everything as best you can, and then it generates more gerbers, send them off for another batch.
Yeah.
And it is a lot of trial and error when it comes to something this size. If it's a small item, like say, I've designed a ROM adapter, so you could use flash ROMs in place of the mask ROMs in an SE, so you can do customized SE boot ROMs, for example, with maybe say 6.08 in flash.
And that's one thing I have to get back to you on, because the Macintosh 2, I believe, takes the same type of ROMs, and it takes 4 of them, I believe. So we need to work together on building an adapter of sorts.
Yes, yeah, no, we do. And then when it comes to like something this size, if it's like, I've got a trace that's missing, you just do a bodge wire. When it comes to something this size, and it's like, okay, I'm going to need like how many bodge wires? 1,
a spool,
2, 3,
yeah.
4, 5, 6, 8, 9. Okay, and then sometimes it might be a case of like, okay, that's fused, that's never going to work. That is wall art. That's a coaster. You should see the amount of dinner placemats I've created.
I'd be happy just to have a dinner plate.
So to answer Thomas Armstrong's questions, no, they are not the 2364. So the Macintosh SE uses the TC531000. So that's 1 megabit, 1 megabit, mask ROMs. They're 8-bit wide, so you use 2 of them. So there's a high and there's a low for the 16-bit data bus.
So that little adapter you're showing basically lets you use an equivalent flash ROM with some modifications, obviously, from that little board.
Yeah, because obviously you can't get EEPROMs of 1 megabyte in 28-pin format. You can get them in 32-pin, but what Apple did again was they just got a commodity part off the shelf, a Toshiba mask ROM part, and just said, hey, here's the ROM that we want to burn on at the factory at the Silicon, make them for us. And they cheated a bit by using the VPP pin, the programming pin on most normal EEPROMs, to be an extra address line. So you don't then have to use we need pin 29, which means we need to make a 32-pin package. And again, to kind of keep the size of the chip down as small as possible. So again, this just allows you to use 27C010s or 27C1001s on these. So you can use your own ROMs or burn your own. So, because obviously on boards which have suffered from corrosion, on boards which have suffered from corrosion, sometimes, unfortunately, the ROM chips do just die. Yeah. I've got some in a box in front of me.
A dead Macintosh classic ROM from my pal Logan from Crazy Tech Reviews. He sent me a board to replace, and ROM was toast. So
the pins on that one are mostly intact.
Yeah.
I mean, there was that dead SE board, the creme brulee board.
Here's a much crustier looking one. This is from an LC.
Oh yeah, see that looks crusty, but again, the pins are still intact.
Yeah.
This one, I was like, okay, I've got this wonderful little Jonard dip extractor. I was like, oh okay. I'm not even kidding. Like the plastic came away and the pins were still in the socket, and they were like, wow, okay, there's no salvaging that. I gave up.
So
again, that was the reason for that. It's a case of I have a problem. Rather than wait for somebody else to fix it, well, I'll just design my own.
Wow, that's so with so the ROMs is obviously one thing to tackle. If you could salvage those from the board, excellent. Especially with a bunch of other things there. So with the board, obviously the first revision had some issues. How many revisions did you have to go through to get something working? 5. Okay.
So we went from revision 1, 1.1, actually went from 1.1 to 1.3. It was going to be 1.2, and I hadn't hit the yes go button. And then I realized, actually, there's a big problem. I hadn't changed that in the silkscreen. But then I found a couple more problems and they needed to be rectified. So it shifted the version number up again. But that still didn't work because there were still some other problems. And so we got revision 1.5 is the one that is working. That's the one where, if you go to my YouTube channel, there's a playlist of the bring up of the board in the first place. And that's the one where it's like it's going doot, and it beeps, and it's not just a one-off; it's a repeatable thing. You put it in the chassis, a video comes up, it's a little bit offset, and it's like light bulb moment. Remove C67, which is pulling H sync down to ground, and it just works. It boots. It turns on. It generates a raster. The ADB adapter works as well. Again, that was a Hail Mary. That was like, well, we don't have a working ADB chip anymore. Let's just go all in. I'm all in on.
So I see that video here on your YouTube channel, version 1.5 initial power up.
Yep, that's the one. That's the one. So pop that into chat, and people can go and bore themselves with me wandering around in my kitchen looking confused.
That is
cool. Also, just to say to House of Moth, is that Jay?
Yes, that's Jay.
Okay, so Jay, it's not so much a board view file. I mean, you do get the gerbers. I mean, the sprint layout is way better than any kind of board view. It does have an inbuilt photo view mode where you can see, the PCB kind of rendered as it should be. You can either choose either with silkscreen or without, or with X-ray or without, and both sides of the board. But yeah, much better to use like the sprint layout test tool than it is to use a board view at all.
Excellent. So you have, and stop me if you want to go into any more detail on any other things I'm glossing over. I'm just thinking about things here. So you have the first working revision. Was there anything on that was still problematic, or was that so 1.5 is basically everything works, or was there something that you're concerned with?
1.5, everything worked, and it was like, okay, it went from nothing working at all to suddenly, ta-da, and it worked. And again, a lot of that was down to Hack Shack on 68K MLA, who sent me a whole list of fixes. He went through my board, my sprint layout file, versus the actual board images, which were in a whole archive, which I've posted in the thread.
Do you want me to share that? I have that on the...
Absolutely. Post that up and just kind of like give an example of and he did this in such a beautifully simple way of component, location on board, problem, example of what it should be. It was so easy to follow. All of the fixes that he details in that post were done inside 15 minutes.
Wow.
In terms of fixes. And it was sometimes as simple as, oh my God, how did I forget that one trace?
Yeah, of course.
Again, it would have been a wire patch on a previous board to do it, or I'll cut that trace there because that's connecting address strobe to address line 8, for example. But ultimately, it is it's down to him that the Rev 1.5 is working.
Wow. Yeah, I'm looking at.
Sometimes you need 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 27 pairs of eyes on a project.
Oh yeah.
So that. Because after staring at it for so long, you're just like, I can't see anything wrong. I can't see. So you need, for a fresh perspective, you need a fresh eyes.
Oh, definitely. And I'm sharing the PCB inspection document you shared with me earlier, and it's just really cool to see your layout photo and then the Apple board photo, and obviously the minute differences that you have nightmares about in your sleep, and then it's right there.
Oh. Yeah, exactly. And then the thing is, when it's presented as well, there's that initial feeling of oh, you plank, how did you not see that? It's right there, you div. And then you think, okay, so I missed it. It's fine. It's a simple mistake. Anybody could make it. I'm not Superman. I'm not putting myself on a pedestal with a cape flying behind my back going, I can reverse engineer everything. If I fail, I'm a failure as a human being. It's not like that. It's like, okay, we make mistakes, and this is why we have in all businesses, whether it's software or hardware, there's a QA department who catch these kind of things, feed them back to the engineers.
Yeah.
And just to say to Rich, when it comes to making a 100% compatible board, the initial idea is just to make as much of a it's not an exact 1-to-1 clone. I'd say it's 0.99 to 1 in terms of a clone. There are certain changes that have been made with regards to, say, the ground and the power planes at the rear I/O. It's more of a limitation of what Sprint can do rather than, what the actual layout of the board is. But it works. It's just the fact that I've had to manually tie in all of the like the actual lug mounting points of like the mini DIN sockets and everything specifically, to a track, which then goes to a veer, which then connects to the ground, rather than them doing it themselves. Because again, Sprint can't separate on certain pads. You can't create a custom pad, or rather you can, but you then have to put an exclusion zone around it and then join it to something else.
So there are certain. So when we were looking at these comparisons before, if you were to look at, let's say, your 1.5 board and an SE board, and some traces are just slightly going a different direction or bending at a different angle, there's a reason for that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in one retrospect, there was like something near one of the sim slots. So, for example, I just got a bit more of a direct route of like, it's going up, it's going along, and there we go, it's at the pin. Whereas what Apple have done is they've kind of gone up, but they kind of come back on themselves and then gone to the pin instead. Now, ultimately, I decided, okay, I'm going to follow that route as well, because I've realized what they're trying to do is they're trying to make trace length as identical as possible all the way through and making sure that their impedance matching everything correctly.
Whereas I wouldn't even thought
if I'd gone correctly, it would have been ever so slightly out. Probably still would have worked, but they had done this from like a tolerance point of view with regards to how they were using at the time. So again, I'd made that adjustment, but okay, I'd dial that back a bit. But there are certain places where there's no reason for it to kind of go around a component when actually, because now the EDA tools that we've got available, and obviously the fabrication that we can do now compared to 1987 when the SE was originally laid out, we can do thinner tracks. The tracks on this board are 0.05 millimeters smaller than the original one on the SE. But it also allows for to be able to route a track between pads and not interfere with anything on the ground plane or the power plane. It's literally like 0.0001 of a millimeter. Like, I've got a perfect gap. Nothing's going to come into contact with it. So you can do a bit more sort of creative routing, and you don't need to do so much like crazy kind of like loop-de-loops and stuff like they've done in certain places on the original board.
Yeah, so this was, obviously a undertaking, and obviously you had a lot of individuals help you out, as you've been mentioning. So, we're saying, Kai reverse engineered and he built this fantastic board, but obviously we are not trying to downplay any of the community's assistance, whether it's, donating parts or their time or anything like that. And the fantastic individuals you mentioned, thank you, because, it takes a team, obviously.
Yeah, and like I said, Hack Shack was the one that kind of like pushed this through to like the finish line. But that doesn't mean to say that other people didn't help. And for example, on 68K MLA, where most of the work was being done, certainly in the early days. Community member Cheese Straws, who again is only about 40-50 miles down the road from here from me, he sent me a working Mac SE board with no faults and no failures, like brand new, never used, from an Apple dealer, and was like, here, have that. That's a donation. So I could use that as a point of reference, so that I didn't have to worry about like trying to use a completely buggered, like battery damaged board and trying to tone out pins and going, oh, well, that's not working, but not realizing there's a via underneath that's been corroded and that sort of stuff. And then obviously, people buying something like the dead boards as wall art as well, because that helps pay for the next round of stuff at the fabs. It helps pay for, like, okay, I'm going to need a whole bunch more 74 FCT 245s. Or, hey, I've sold 2 boards as wall art. And that means I can now go and pay Torbar $45 to go and get me some 30-pin SIM sockets from PE Connectors, who don't sell them, annoyingly. Stuff like that, and whether or not it's coming in as a donation, or whether it's just like, oh, hey, I've got a bit of information on this, or people offering to help. That is what has made this project. If it was just me without any of that help, I would still be here scratching my head, just going, why won't you work? No guarantee that it would have come off the production line.
Yeah, and that's I mean, there are so many projects that that people get flustered with and they stop because you only know what you know, and other people who have experience in different areas or have already done some work in the area. It's always fantastic when you all get to collaborate and work on a shared goal, like recreating this board, which is fantastic.
I, I think there was a lot of community heft behind it because I think no one had tried taking this on before. So it's already a kind of like, oh, this is interesting. I want to see where this goes, and then people kind of like get interested in the thread, and like the initial postings were just like, here, data dump of everything that I've done so far. Not like, hi, I'm doing it now, and I'm sort of like live typing as I'm going. It's like, okay, I've been at this for a day or two now. This is what I'm doing. There's enough information in there to get people on board with the idea of like, this will never be possible.
Yeah, and I'm sure as you present your progress, the amount of individuals go, no, he's crazy, this will never work, sort of dies down a little bit because obviously there's some traction getting done here.
I mean, I'm so used to like with the Amiga community, there's a bit of a difference. In the Amiga community, it's a bit of a fractious bunch. You say, hey, I've got an idea to do something. And rather than them chiming in and going like, yeah, that'd be cool, you just get a load of really like very overly skeptical people going, nah, it'll never work. And then even if you do make it work, they're like, yeah, well, you got lucky. There's no kind of positive kind of like reinforcement in that world. And the fact that, and then if you do go ahead and you build something like, yeah, well, I won't buy it for anything more than 10 quid. That's an extreme example of some of the people that exist in that community, but it's one of the reasons why, I just kind of got a little bit disillusioned with it. Not fully, but enough to just be able to, okay, I'll pull back from that. I'll try something.
Yeah.
And hence, that's where we're at now.
Well, we are so happy that you did.
I just want to say as well to Thomas Armstrong, with regards to reverse engineering the PAL or the GAL, the glue chip on the Macintosh SE. Now that's the thing. It does a couple of different things. It buffers the clock signal. It also sorts out the DMA requests between the SCSI and the BBU, and it also sorts out which floppy drive is being used. And it does it in a very janky way. And for ages it was kind of like, well, how are they doing this? And so again, you pulled out the original GAL chip. Actually, it was a HAL. So that was it was a mask ROM version of a PAL or a GAL. And there's a way that you can take a 16L8 PAL or HAL and plug it into an EEPROM reader with a little adapter, and you can read out the contents of it as like almost like a input output of like, well, this is what I pumped in, this is what I've got out, and it generates essentially just a load of binary. And then you can pass that binary and then get an equation map out at the end of it. For like, oh, well, this pin is doing, you tell it what pin is assigned to what. Say this one's I/O, this one's voltage, and this one's output, enable, etc., etc. And then at the end of it, you get an equation list. And I got 99% of the way there with regards to the glue chip. And it was like, okay, well, this equation is making sense, and I can see that it's doing this and this and this. And then at the end, it was like, oh, okay, well, we've done all that. Now get to the output enable equation, which was 9 megabytes and about 300 pages long and made no sense at all. It really was just absolute garbage. So I ended up actually enlisting the help of a guy called John, who is known as Porchy and on Jammer Arcade. And one of the things that he did was he took the same HAL and he did a reverse engineer of it. And again, the equations I pulled out of it were again 90, 95, 99% the way there. But he really did kind of like trim it together. And he sent me the JED file, which I then burned to like another little PAL 1608. Actually, no, this is an ATF version of the chip. So it's an ATF 16V8. So it can either be a PAL or a GAL. And it was like, okay, we'll try that. And it worked first time. Literally everything just worked. And then after it had been reversed, by John as well, that particular chip, I was doing some reading on there's the big scary book, the Macintosh Family Hardware Reference Manual, and it lists all of the various kind of like models of like the block diagrams of how everything's connected, and there on the pages for the SE, it's actually listing what the glue is doing, and they actually show in Logic's diagram for like very simplistic. Oh, hang on, they're just using a 74LS125 gate there, and one there, and what? Oh, okay, yeah. And then you kind of work it out in your head, like, oh, that's what they're doing. So you write what each logic gate is doing, and you compare that with the equation list. It's like, yeah, that is identical. The equation list matches what the logic should be doing, and Apple actually published it.
Yeah.
Not in like not like a program listing, but like trying to be sort of like so vague, but actually being like very specific as to what the glue is. It's a single inverter for inverting the clock signal, because in previous versions it went through a 74F04 to invert the clock signal coming in, to pipe a nice clean one out. And the rest of it is just 74LS125 gates of, and then connected in a certain sequence to just make everything work.
Wow.
It's just so ridiculously simple.
And it's amazing that this stuff is out there too. The documents are out there to help you, sort of.
Oh yeah. And one of the other things that I've done as well, so the actual glue clone chip. I mean, obviously you could use a PAL or in this case an ATF16V8 to replicate it. I actually decided, okay, I'm going to go full on low level hardware with this. Actually took a VQFN part. So this is like it's tiny. It's like half the size of a grain of rice. That and a single, I think it was a 74 LVC something. It was just a simple inverter. So 2 ICs and a voltage regulator on a PCB, the same size as the outline of this chip, implementing all of the glue functions in hardware.
Wow. That is awesome, though. That is, jeez.
Yeah, and again, that's just I'm not coming at this as an electronics engineer.
Yeah.
I've not done a career in any of this. I am an enthusiastic amateur at the end of the day. But it's the learning curve as I'm going along, and it just keeps drawing you in. It's like, oh wait, hey, what? How does that do that? Followed by why does that do that? Followed by can I improve on it?
So talking a bit about some of the challenges that you encountered, I know we already talked about a bunch, but I was just curious. Were there any things that we glossed over that really were sort of a challenge to overcome with this project? Obviously, you had a lot of individuals offering their assistance. Anything we glossed over that you might want to mention?
I think that I did kind of touch on it a little earlier. Was the VIA chip. So again, on the Mac SE board, it's labeled as the 6523. And just going through that whole process of like, wait, this doesn't make sense for it to be a 6523. And again, sort of like a lot of the documentation out there specifies the 6523 as a 6523 MOS chip, which did exist, which did also do a lot of the same functions, but had a different pinout and worked differently. And again, you kind of go through all of the schematics of like the Mac Plus and the Mac 128K and the 520. Well, they're using 65C22 all the way up to here. Why would the SE be different? And then when you start like, okay, let's go at this from the assumption of this chip is a 65C22. Let's go through it. What's it connected to? And again, using the test function in Sprint has made it so easy. Like, well, that's connected to that. That would make sense for that to go there. And then something light bulb moment. Yeah, it is a 65C22. It's just Apple being obtuse and like, no, it's a custom part. Like, don't lie, it's not custom.
You see that Apple logo on it? That means it's custom.
Yeah. Question from Mozam Raja. Okay, so the RTC chip on the SE and the SE30, it is unique, but there are replacements.
Oh, we were just talking about this on a stream the other day, so that's interesting.
Yeah, so if anybody wants like some Apple RTC chips, I've got some new old stock ones. They're available from UT Source for about 42 cents each. And
you'll have to email me that link.
Yeah, they have thousands and thousands of these things because, again, this is one of those things that Apple decided to order a bunch of parts and then never used them.
Wow. Awesome.
Although I know what he's talking about. So the Tiny 85 is an Atmel AVR microcontroller that is pin compatible with the RTC in terms of like power and ground go to the same place. And Quarton on 68K MLA has written up a whole bunch of code to plonk onto it. But I don't think anyone's actually tested it yet because it's at the moment it's been a secondary concern. Obviously, the first concern was getting the board up and running with the original hardware. Now obviously we've reversed the glue. We're on the process for the ADB. Once that's done, it's the RTC, and then once that's done, well, the big one is obviously the BBU. So I designed a breakout board for the BBU, and I think Mac Effects built the adapter for it, and it's designed so you can plug a logic analyzer in and snoop what's going on each pin of the BBU. So you can either replicate it in a CPLD, an FPGA, and actually Quarton has done a hell of a lot of work on reverse engineering the BBU just from the functionality of the original PALs, because essentially the BBU is the heart of the machine. It's basically, you look at a Macintosh Plus and there's loads of PALs and HALs all over it, whether registered or R8, R4s, R6s, L8. And the BBU takes all of those and shoves them all in a single package with a few tweaks, but essentially the same. And one of the things that we found was that the Brazilian Macintosh clone, the Unitron.
Oh, yeah.
When they reverse engineered that, the guy that reverse engineered it published all of the PAL equations that he'd reverse engineered from those machines, and that Quarton was then able to put into Verilog and okay, well, that makes this state machine work, and this one does this, and this one selects the RAM, and so there's been a hell of a lot more done with regards to the BBU than was ever documented anywhere. And this is just like skimming the surface. And Johan in chat has also decapped the BBU as well and imaged it, and it looks fantastic. And I absolutely cannot wait for anything like on that side of things to come. Because once that's done, it's literally, well, I think the Swim chip would be the next one to tackle. But after that, Apple ROMs, and then everything else is available off the shelf.
I mean it's great. It's great to know where you are progressing with what pieces you could replace and such, and that it's really cool. I mean, you mentioned Unitron. I just was like geeking out because I just I spent a few years doing research on the Macintosh clones, and I'm doing a little video series on them. So I released the first part in January, and in that. I didn't want to start with the PowerPC clones because there were so many kits and things before then. So I started at the beginning, and Unitron was
Outbounds and
so on. Exactly, the Dynamax and all that fun stuff, and the Walkmax, and so I started doing research for it, and of course came across the Unitron stuff. But it's really cool to oh yeah, I know what the Unitron is, and then that information is being used today in a useful fashion to try and reverse engineer stuff. That is just awesome. That is just so cool.
Yep. It's funny, the sort of stuff that people kind of put out. It's useless. No one will ever use this. And then all of a sudden, a GitHub project gets opened up and Verilog starts getting written. It's like, oh, no, this is helpful. I mean, one of the funny thing is a little bit of trivia about the BBU. So the SE was faster than the Plus by about 25%. Maybe even 50% in some circumstances because of the way in which it's addressing RAM. But it can go faster. You could speed the BBU up a lot faster and have it actually do proper, full, fast page mode to get 66% speed increase, 75%. And again, that's still using the standard, 7.83 megahertz plus.
Wow.
Doing nothing more than simple, it's just tweaks.
So obviously, right now, we're at the point where you have this 1.5 board. Do you want to talk a bit about what your next steps are for this board? So are you, if you have a website, would you like to? Obviously, we have the phoenixengineering.org site right under your face right now. Could you explain a little bit about the next steps for the board and about your website and where that comes into play?
Okay, so I figured that after the the board was brought up for the very first time. Okay, well, the bulk of the work has been done, and the thread on 68K MLA had stretched now to, I think, 39 pages, and there's a lot of information in there, but it's spaced out with lots of people, saying, "Oh, hey, this is cool. Wouldn't it be cool?" And blah blah blah. And then like more information is like sporadic, like page 3, 7, 9, 12. So taking all of that information and just condensing it into a single wiki article. Obviously, the one that is on the website, it's still a work in progress. Unfortunately, I don't have as much time on the weekends as I would need to be. I mean, I could spend 5 days solid just writing articles on it. So it's kind of like updated a little bit sporadically at the moment, but essentially that wiki article is detailing the process of like how I have gotten to where I am. And Phoenix Engineering was, set up in the wake of the successful boot as a proper company. Its ultimate goal is to be able to like produce more things. I mean, I'm working on a Macintosh Classic next. Again, I've done the top and the bottom layers of that. I'm just making sure the inner layers are done, and then it's again off to the fab with that. And we've got the Bowl SE30 already, like nearly ready to go as well. So these things are starting to kind of just appear more and more and more. And in addition to that as well, I've I've got some visual aids here as well. Yet another box. So again, open source hardware GitHub projects such as open source 4 megabyte sims, which are great. Obviously won't work in the SE30. They'll work in a 2CI though. See what we got here. We've got some 16 megabyte 2FX memory as well. Alluded to.
Yeah, that Macintosh 2FX memory is hard to come by these days.
Oh yeah, exactly. But also now we got 1 megabyte sims. So the more and more projects, whether it's like the ROM adapter or the ADB transceiver. Devil nearly like yeeted my ROM out the window there. Whether it's like the little PCBs for people to build up themselves. Again, it's all open source. You can download the Gerbers, you can download the Sprint files, and make them yourself, sell them. I don't care. Where it comes to to this for me is obviously I would like to be able to be like a distributor of like official ones, but hey, if you want to go and get your own one made. I mean, I'm doing these SE boards in matte black with gold Enig, like immersion gold plating. So the initial run of these is 20 boards, and then they're gone. That's it. That's the only black ones I will ever make that come from me. Every other one will be a blue one in gold. It's just a regular one. Now, obviously, it might be, it's probably a little bit of a gimmick. Maybe.
But the black ones
if you want
have already sold, so it's not a gimmick.
Well, they have already sold, and obviously, if you do want a board, then people can message me on 68K MLA. For the moment, I mean, I am planning on, starting up a Tindy store properly, so people can buy these from me, much like Rob Taylor did with the Amiga 500 Plus Plus. But also with the black board, you get a certificate of authenticity.
How cool is that?
Laminated and signed with the laminated and signed and numbered. So that's it. And then again, with the contributors, they all get one of these shirts as well as part of the pack-in. And then if you want one of these yourself, you can't have one. they've all been allocated. Although, if you want to go and get your own custom Apple swag made, then just reach out to Workwear Express or a local company that does similar things.
That is cool. So hopefully there will at least be an avenue for people to get stuff from you directly, so you get some of your resources back from this endeavor, from that Phoenix Engineering site that you're going to eventually, I guess, put a way there for people to inquire about either getting bare boards or things like that.
Essentially, if people want a bare board, for the moment, the avenue is 68k MLA. Drop me a DM on there, and I will quite happily sell you my board. I've had so many orders for boards. I need to order another 20, 30, 40 boards. Because of the amount of people that have just gone, I want the board. No, I want the board. No, I want the board. This is the amount of people just throwing their hands in the air. Wanting one. There's been really good response, and this is the point I want to make: is I'm not out to make millions off of this. This is for the community. It's a community-led project. It's an open source hardware project. The files are out there. If you want to go and tweak it, play with it, build your own, absolutely go ahead and do it. But at the same time, if you want one that's come from the original source, where I know that it's come from the fab, everything's been checked over, the Gerber file that I've sent them hasn't got any errors or glitches or haven't been buggered about with beforehand. If you want an original board, come to me, I'll sell you. And it is literally I just want to kind of cover some of the costs that have been put into this project. A lot of it is like I said, it covers things like the cost of a production run of boards or the customs fees to import them, despite the fact I've already paid for it. Just sort of stuff like that. But at the same time, I don't begrudge having spent so much time and effort and money on the project, because ultimately I've learned a lot doing this, not just expanding my own knowledge of just electronics engineering in general, but it's actually kind of led to a few job opportunities that have kind of cropped up for me internally at work from certain departments going, hey, I just saw your project on Hackaday when that popped up out of nowhere. And I was like, oh, yeah, I woke up the morning after that article was posted, about 100 people pinging me going, oh, congrats on the article. I'm like, what article? Hackaday comes to and even people at work are like, hey, we got our eye on you, kid. And I'm like, okay,
what did I do?
Good thing or not? What do I do? And they're like, oh, hey, we want you to come and do this cool thing in our department doing not IT support, which, when you've been doing IT support for as long as I have, very wizened and old, and, it would make a nice change.
Which is great. I mean, you obviously have learned so much, as you were saying, taking on this project, and so it as well as develop your skills and your abilities, which is fantastic. So by all means, take advantage of that, and you never know when that will lead you. But about the SE, that's a fantastic project. I know a few people's ears perked up when you mentioned the Classic, and obviously the Classic. And I know we had a little bit of discussion about the Classic too, and obviously there are similarities there, but it all starts with getting a board, tearing it down, and as the process you were explaining before. You said you're sort of in progress on a Classic there. Are there any, not to put you on the spot of what you're particularly working on, but of a dream board to reverse engineer? Not that you have any plans to do it, but just you think Quadra 840 AV or something silly. Any pie in the sky dreams of something that you think would be personally cool to live again?
I'll let you into a little secret.
Okay.
So
nobody tell.
Adrian Flack from Adrian's Digital Basement, through an intermediary, sent me a bunch of boards. The Classic board that I showed earlier is actually the one that he had on his channel.
Oh, okay, cool.
And showing how damaged that was. But there are a couple more boards in that package that were quite interesting, such as a Quadra 660 AV. That was okay, this kind of looks interesting. Is this a 4-layer board? Is it a 6-layer board? So, something like that. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know if I've necessarily got, enough sanity in the tank for a project like that. I would say there's so many systems that are worthy of being saved. Obviously, things like the SEs, things like the Classics, they're kind of going to be beloved machines because they're so iconic. A lot of people grew up with them because they were so cheap and because they were so ubiquitous. But when it comes to some of the older stuff, they didn't really kind of suffer from any of those problems. So, all the schematics are out there if somebody wanted to reproduce them. It comes down to I don't know, maybe something like an LC475, which actually is ironic because I've actually got the main chips from that, again, from UT source. They have all of the original Apple new old stock never used parts for that. And again, it's a machine. So the LC475 board, it'll fit in the chassis for an LC, an LC2, an LC3. They use the same power supply. It has the same ports on it as every other LC machine out there. So again, that one would be like a good one because again, so many of those machines were battery damaged as well.
Yeah. And that's a cool form factor because it's a little desktop, and so not everybody maybe have the space or has the resource for like the old CRTs, which is another thing that is a part that is getting harder to find in good, non-burned in, non-necked working condition. So a little recreation of a desktop would be a cool idea because you have that form factor which shared many different. You had the LCs, you had the later the Quadra 605 and everything like that. So there's a lot of love there for that form factor, and I think that would be neat. That would be really cool.
I did just think of another kind of project as well. When you said what would be my dream project, I just realised I've actually been staring at it for the better part of 2 hours. I don't know if anybody has ever seen one of these.
Oh,
yes. That is a Daystar Power PC accelerator for the Quadra 605 and LC475.
I have a 605 that would love that.
So again, this one is like, well, this one didn't work. Again, it was, just finding it alone was like, ooh, yeah, I must have it. It will be mine. So I was all about to sort of like repaste the heatsink on this thing. And if I just pop the heatsink off there, you might be able to see on camera. Yeah, that die is cracked all the way through the middle. That's dead. I thought, well, again, this is how my brain works. That's not completely dead, surely.
Surely there's some life.
There must be a way of fixing this. And again, this one also comes with a cache module, which if you can find them, a lot of them are missing the L2 cache on here. This PowerPC 601, it's the documentation is out there, is available for it. But again, you wouldn't go to Mouser and buy one. I don't think you ever could. It's the sort of thing that it showed up in sort of large quantities. When I say it showed up in large quantities, just give me a second. Sure. I'm going to pull a box. I'm going to pull a box out here. So this is a rather interesting box that I discovered. So if Ross Bamford is still in the chat, then he'll recognise it. So what's in that, you wonder? I mean, it's got an Apple part number 337S7121. Who's it come from? Oh, it's come from IBM. Oh, it's got an IBM seal on the box. Yeah. I wonder what's in there. So
there's a bunch of blue meanies hiding in there.
Well, if I just tilt the camera down so you can kind of.
You might need to turn the blur off there. It's still looking for you.
Oh yeah, no, I will definitely need to turn the blur off on this because I don't know. I kind of feel like opening this up is going to be like opening up like the Grail in Raiders. Someone's face may melt.
Look away. Keep your eyes shut.
Yeah, exactly. So let's just open this box here. There we go. And then, cardboard. What's under the cardboard? Oh, there's some foam. What's under the foam? It's an entire tray of brand new, unused IBM PowerPC 601 chips at 75 megahertz.
Oh my goodness, that is awesome.
Yeah. So there is an idea. There is an idea for a project in here.
I'll take 12.
Okay, how many trays? I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've got 8 trays.
Wow.
8 trays at 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. 12 times 8.
So how many cookies can you make?
I mean, I don't. I mean, they did do symmetric multiprocessor 601 systems, so I could go completely mad with the CPU accelerator, but no, no. So again, this was just procured out of randomness for projects like this this accelerator card where it's a rare piece of kit. You can't find these.
Yeah, exactly. They go for stupid money.
The bus translator on here, for example, this is Apple's first ever ARM chip.
Wow.
So the first machine. That's the first ARM chip, even before the eMate or anything else. They made this in conjunction with Acorn at Cambridge. That particular ARM chip that handles all of the bus interaction between the 68K bus and the PowerPC bus. Even if you couldn't get these chips anymore, and I have looked, you can't get them anymore. You can't get them anymore. You could still, even by stripping this board down, imaging it, stripping back the layer, imaging that one, so on and so forth. You go through layer. Once you've done that, composite all together, and then you can backwards engineer a schematic for it. Once you've got a schematic for it, it's a case of then you're just left with a question mark in the middle where the ARM chip is, but you know which signals are going in, which ones are coming out, and what it's got to do. So this is the thing. When it comes to like reverse engineering, you can go one-to-one cloning, or you can go, well, I know how that works, and now I know how 90% of this works. I've just got to figure out the last 10%, and we're done.
Yeah, and that's a lot of comments and things I've seen online with either your project or the SE30 project is people get very excited and they jump 10 projects down the line of when do we get built-in VGA? When do we get built-in Ethernet and all this stuff? And obviously, obviously the stepping stones there are reverse engineer the one-to-one of the system there or the device, and then you learn from that and you say, okay, well, let's see where we could go from there. But these are projects that take up a crazy amount of time. I mean, how much time since when you started this project, when it was an inkling in your mind? What date was that? How many years ago? How many decades ago?
That was the beginning of June. Lockdown has done many things to people. At that period, pants were entirely optional, and
they still are.
The world seemed a very weird place. And when it came down to it, I guess it was that Adrian Black video that kind of like spurred me into kind of like, does this exist? I wonder. It started off as a cursory Google search, followed by a very quick trip down the rabbit hole of like, I know what I'm going to do for the rest of lockdown. And bearing in mind, I'm working a full-time job throughout this, so the only time I have in the evenings are the evenings. So by the time I come home, cook dinner, eating dinner, there's like a 2-hour window to do something. So do a little bit in sprint maybe, and then crawl into bed and fall asleep, and then rinse repeat for a couple of days, a couple of weeks. But you do get burned out from doing it, and like I said, when you're looking at that for so long, your eyes start to hurt. And you're like, I just need to take a break for a couple of for a week or two, or while something is on the way from the board house and you're waiting on like the next production, it's like, well, I can't do anything. I won't do anything on that until then. If you were to kind of toss up the man hours, all told, I would say I've sunk about 3 solid months of 8-hour days into this in terms of work. I mean, there has been, working until 2 in the morning on because when you get to a point where you're like, I've got an idea. And so for example, it was reverse engineering the glue. It's like you're spending 8 hours, you might tweak one character, you might shift one bit around, and you simulate that. But a lot of it is staring, it's thinking, it's trying to understand why a thing is doing that thing. How do I make sand behave? How can I make silicon just do my bidding? I'd say about three solid months of work has gone into it.
And not to count anyone else who's participated with their ideas or their thoughts or their cross-examining of things, or reverse engineering of particular chips and stuff. I mean, it's very easy from me as an excited schoolboy to go, no, okay, now do an SE60 that's 60 megahertz and has a PowerPC add-on and is full color and that flies around and yeah. You know?
Yeah, see, this is one very valuable thing that I learned from the Amiga community is people will always they will never be satisfied with what is there. They always want more.
Yeah.
Now, you can try and tear your hair out and try and give them what they want, but at the end of the day, you've got to kind of think, is there actually the market for this beyond one or two people that really want this? Yeah. So the goal with the SE was, let's bring dead SEs back to life, as they are. You know, you can fiddle with them later. You know, so I mean, when it comes to like things like the adapter boards that I've done, such as like the ADB, that's purely from a functional standpoint. Yeah, let's get ADB working on a machine where we can still buy the ADB transceivers. Yeah. You know, these are easier to harvest from like dead classics or classics 2s, for example. You know, the ROM adapter, again, that's purely functional for if your ROMs are dead and you need ROMs, well, there you go. There's an option for it. So there's always like an avenue for being able to like throw in like a tchotchke or whatever for functionality purposes. But when it comes to kind of like expanding on something, I think actually, I mean, Thomas Armstrong in chat just said, or a CRT LCD replacement for classic Macs. That actually is something I've been thinking about. Again, it's like in the wake of this, I'm like, right, where is my mind going to now? This is like a million different directions, but one of them was the CRT LCD replacement, and I kind of figured out how to do it. At least in theory, yeah. Okay. So it wouldn't rely on the analog board. You could replace the power supply in the machine with an RT65B, which is a much more modern switch mode DC to DC power supply that provides way more current than you ever actually need, and it's silent and fanless as well. So you'd be able to tear all of that out. You could, tear out the CRT as well. And any kind of high voltage, risk would be completely eliminated from the machine. So as Cyprian says, yeah, PDS video card to drive the LCD. Now, again, this is building off the basis of, Bob Braun's project of the snooping the SE bus by the PDS slot to kind of like figure out, okay, where is the video data going between address 17 and address 21, and then taking that data using an STM32, like a blue pill Arduino, you can buy for like £3. You get one of those and pipe out the frames from that over USB to a host terminal on Mac OS. Now, how hard would it be to take those frames and shove them back into an LCD? Well, you can get a 9-inch LCD which fits perfectly in the diagonal for a Mac. And if you want an acrylic screen in front of it, you can do that as well. But again, it's taking something like something like an STM32 and piping that back out as like an LVDS video signal, or VGA, or something that those little displays can handle. Now, obviously, the Mac's internal resolution is 512 by 342. Not 512 by 384. Yeah. So all you have to do is you pad. Yeah. You would have to pad the image with 40 pixels top and bottom, so you end up with like a kind of like a letterbox effect on the LCD. But essentially, there you go. It's upscaled to 1024 by 1024 by 684.
Wow. And you could get color.
Color would be a bit beyond it. I think it's how much feature do you want? Because obviously you'd have to have color quick draw in the ROM.
That's right. That's right.
Wouldn't that be nice to patch that in? Possible, but baby steps.
I think your rabbit hole has entered another warren. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Rather than going like yes, let's throw everything at it. Yeah, it's like, okay, we've done that. Let's try this one small improvement. If we can get that working, you can build on it. But you go, okay, well, we've done that. Let's do something else instead. I mean, at the moment, the focus is on the custom chips and reverse engineering all of those. Yeah. I mean, obviously, Glue is done. BBU, Quarton is running away with that, and it's great. ADB, I'm really excited to see what John Masters can pull out of this and what the guys can kind of reverse engineer from that, because then that's another one down. yeah, obviously then it would be things like the RTC chip, and then the SWIM, and then the Sony sound chip. Although the Sony sound chips are available in volume at UT, so again, new old stock.
Wow.
Sony sound chip. Where we got that?
I think I have a few of those myself.
So again, I've got a bucket of these are new old stock Apple chips.
Oh my goodness.
So does anybody want a whole box of Sony sound chips?
Nobody else wants those. You could just send them to me. Don't worry. That's...
I've got a box of PLCC SWIMs. I've got a box of DIP 28 SWIM chips. Let's see, I've got ASCs. I've got CUDAs. I've got SE30 VRAM. I've got some brand new 53C80 SCSI controllers for everything from the Mac Plus up. Wow. RTC, like I said, you can buy almost all of these from UT source. And if you can, buy in bulk because the savings on it are worth it. Buy one for £4 or buy 100 for 33 pence each. I just see what Rich has written.
Yeah, of course.
Stop drilling.
Sorry. It's very hard. So we talked about the SE. We talked about some future projects that you were thinking of. Obviously, you've done a heck of a service to the community, you and yourself, who have been laboring over this project. And I just want to stress again how much time and effort and resources and thinking and hours went into this. Because when you get somebody who is, of the lines of, oh, well, just, add this feature to it. There are steps to a project. And what I think is really cool is, you've set the ground level here of, okay, here's an SE30 board. Here's the layout and everything for it. And you go ahead and say, okay, here's that. Somebody else could come along and say, all right, well, I want to make this a smaller package, or I want to do this to it, or I want to make this enhancement or whatever. That level is there. So it doesn't, the burden is almost lifted slightly off your shoulders for making enhancements or whatever, because somebody else could look at that and it's open source and say, well, I want to try and do a VGA mod or something like that. And they could work on that.
Yeah, no, exactly. And like I said, if somebody wants to take the Sprint files and use that to reverse engineer a schematic, we did actually find a Beaumark SE schematic buried in the Macintosh repository, I think it was. That just surfaced out of nowhere. And again, that was very, 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 very helpful. If somebody wants to take the work and make it like a derivative of it, then then they can, and I'm happy for them to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the beauty of these types of projects. You have this foundation, and they could take it everywhere since it's open source. So that was really all I was thinking about as far as the Macintosh SE goes. Anybody in the chat have any questions? I know we answered a lot of that already, but just leaving it open to your discussion. Is there anything cool that you have seen of projects that you are interested in? Do you have any hobbies you want to talk about? I mean, this is all on you, I know. But if you have any other things you'd like to discuss, I'm happy to sit here.
Well, I was going to suggest actually. I was gonna say, do you mind if I just take a quick break?
Please do.
I need to refill with water and unfortunately I am diabetic, which means I've been holding it for like an hour.
No.
I need to flush.
You go. I'll keep everyone entertained for you. I will mute your audio so we don't hear any weird noises in the background, and you will be back momentarily. So thank you, Kai.
Yes, I will. I'll turn the camera and mic off just so people don't hear me go from the bathroom.
Thank you, Kai.
Okay, yeah, I'll be back in a bit. Okay.
Excellent. Well, I mean, we've been going for 2 hours here almost, or 2.5 hours, however it was. But let's take a little break here. I can't take a break. I have to stay here for a moment. Let's catch up on everyone in the chat here. We have 51 people here. Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Mozam. I mean, I'm just a gracious host here. I am as much of a dork as a lot of you all are. I love this stuff. I want to learn more about it, and I'm just consistently being blown away here. I mean, this is fantastic. I just, the amount of love and effort that has gone into this project is simply phenomenal. And from a repair standpoint, having everything mapped out on one of these boards is simply beautiful. So that is, you have basically the secrets of this now, and I really think that the groundwork has been set, because it's no longer, oh, that's impossible. You can't reverse engineer a Macintosh board. Well, Kai has shown, and others have shown, that it's possible. You could take a board like this, or even a more complex one, and you can go ahead and reverse engineer it, and that it leaves the gates open for anybody who says, well, I want to do a VGA mod, or I want to make an adapter so this PDS slot could use the Macintosh SE30 PDS cards and stuff like that. I mean, just fantastic. So I keep using the word fantastic, but I am flabbergasted. I'm so overjoyed by the type of work that is being done in the community, whether it's from the SCSI 2SD adapters or the RAS SCSI adapters, the Blue SCSI adapters, and everything else is just a wonderful, wonderful effort. No, Trina, there's not going to be another episode tomorrow. I have to work, sadly. Like Kai, I have a day job. But yeah, we did an Open Talk episode yesterday with James, aka Hyper Talking, where we looked at all these PowerPC clones, which was fantastic. So if you missed that, I actually added chapters into the YouTube listing there. So if you want, go back and watch that. Now, I know these episodes are very visual, but just a quick poll here in the chat. Do you think any of this would be interesting as an audio stream? I know you lose half of it. Just thinking, maybe you guys have long drives. You don't mind hearing a bunch of guys yaddle on from the Open Talk podcast, videocast, stream, whatever this thing is. I think it could work as an audio. Obviously, you're missing out some of it, but we are hearing replies from the chat that people would listen. So, okay, maybe this will be the first podcast type thing that happens. But excellent. So let me just catch up on some of the things here in the chat. I've been trying to jot down most of the questions here. Let's see. Yeah, you don't need an electronics whiz to do this. I certainly am not. I'm having trouble wrapping my head around some things, but you got to start somewhere. So you just don't doubt yourself. You could do it there. Yeah, so it'd probably just be called Open Talk Podcast. There's a lot of good names out there that have already been stolen. If I was smart enough 15 years ago, maybe I would have gotten the jump on it, but oh well. But there's also other great podcasts out there. There's the Retro Maccast that's out there. Ken from the Computer Clan has a new podcast coming out about Apple keynotes. There's a bunch of cool stuff there, so I'd have to probably edit it a little bit, but that would be fun anyway. But the visual component is key. Now, there used to be, I don't know if they still exist, there used to be enhanced podcasts through iTunes where you could actually, it was like sort of like a slideshow. I don't know if they did, it wasn't like a straight up video file, but with iTunes you had like these cues and these chapters and it'd have an image. That'd be pretty cool. But so we have someone who's trying to design a cache add-on card for their Dell 386. Very cool. I mean, yeah, that's lovely. And yes, I would love a PowerPC add-on card for an LC series or a Quadra. I mean, I don't need one. I have plenty of PowerPC Macs, but just to have one to play around with, I mean, yay! I mean, come on. Yeah, I want it with Ethernet and Wi-Fi, and I want it to be connected up to a toaster so it makes me food as well.
I have returned from the dead.
I hear a growling voice in the background, which is Kai has returned from beyond the grave. There he is.
Greetings, mortal.
So we were just chatting up about a few things here, and I was reminiscing about podcasts back in the day, because I think iTunes used to at least have this feature, or maybe I'm just imagined it, that I think you could do stills, still images as well. As you're sort of doing an audio thing, and so we were thinking maybe this could be exported to that audience as well. But anyway,
yeah, maybe, yeah, possibly. So I just want to have a quick scroll through the chat.
Sure.
Okay, so Lemonhead, yeah, no, absolutely. If you want to design a cache add-on for a Dell 386, go for it. I mean, the only thing kind of stopping you is you at the end of the day. I mean, you got to think of things are a hell of a lot easier now than they were even 10 years ago. We've got open source like EDA packages like KiCad, and yes, it is pronounced that way. And that's not an ego thing. It is actually genuinely pronounced KiCad. So when people ask me what I use, I use MeatCAD. It was designed for me by me.
My twin brother created it. Yeah.
I'm wondering actually if my older brother actually lives in Canada. If you're watching this, hello. He may not tune in. I'm kind of dull that way. But yeah, no. When it comes down to sort of like designing something, if you're willing to use the EDA packages to design the packages, I mean, you define the package size, whether it's a DIP 40 or PLCC or whatever. Just assign, draw the package. Very easy, very intuitive. There's loads of tutorials out there. Assign the pins on it, and then you add it to a custom library. And with KiCad 6, now any parts that you put into your project, if you export the project, the parts are contained within, and you don't anymore have to link to a custom library, which somebody then has to import. Makes it a hell of a lot easier as well. And also, starting with a 386 as well, it's tried, it's tested. There's documentation about most of it out there as well. And you can always just go and grab like a 386, like an old 386 motherboard with cache on it. And again, you can kind of backwards engineer. It's like, okay, well, they're using these chips, and these chips. How do they go together? And then just work from that process and go backwards.
So as more questions come in here, I did have something I sort of skipped over, and you could elaborate as much as you want. But I'm just curious. You have a love for electronics and classic machines and everything like that. We talked a lot about the hardware. But do you have any particular system software or games or applications that you love, whether it be retro or old or new or anything like that? Just try to get a mapping of like your video game vices back in the day or anything like that.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, I know I've touched on it like very early on in the stream. SimCity 2000. That was the days, weeks, bloody years I sunk into SimCity over the years. Whether it's 2000, 2004. I mean, on the SimCity 2000 on the Mac was the revelation that kind of went, oh my god, I've never seen this before. I've never even heard of even the original SimCity before. And then here we go. We've got SimCity 2000 on the Mac, and you've got sound, and you've got sound effects, and it's like isometric, and like, wow, this looks great. This is amazing. This is, and it's the sort of game where, nobody dies, you don't have lives, it's not frustrating, you can just build stuff. And I absolutely did adored like the SimCity series up until SimCity 4 was the last good one, and then EA kind of made it garbage. But then so everything after that is crap, in my opinion. But then I moved on to City Skylines, and I was actually really, really lucky. Back in 2019, I was actually running IT support for an event in Nyborg in Denmark. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that even correctly, but 750 people there for like a week, 10 days. We call it Hack Week. Might give a clue as to who it's for. But yeah, so Hack Week was taking place, and again, you have a lot of external people kind of coming in to kind of show off like their skills and what they can do. And it's less of like, it's all about the core product and all the rest of it. It's like, hey, what cool thing can you do in a week? Present your project. Yeah, you got 5 days. And some of the people that were there were actually Colossal Order and Paradox, the creators of City Skylines, who I ended up having about 3 hours worth of conversation with them, clustered around a box of red wine. Well, it might have been 2 boxes, three boxes of red wine, talking about everything from the state of the game through to what everybody thought of the latest 2016 Doom, and who our favorite Star Trek characters were, and favorite episodes of Deep Space Nine. So again, and it's just I thought the game was cool before, but then you get to know the devs behind it, and you're like, they really care about this game. You can see in the DLCs that they produce and their support for workshop content and everything. It's like they've taken the baton that was handed to them by the corpse of Maxis and they've taken it and they've run with it, and they're in another stadium at this point.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So when it comes to City Skylines, yeah, like I said, it's my modern vice, but that comes from SimCity 2000 on the Mac back in with like 1994, 95 maybe as well. But yeah, it's kind of come from there.
That is cool. I have a box copy. I only picked it up a few years ago. But what's interesting is it has, I think there are 3 or 4 floppies in there, but it has like the 68K version. Then like you could also run it on PowerPC. I think there was an extra disc there or something like that. But it's, then there's the CD version that came out later. But that was also a favorite of mine as a kid. I remember playing the original one. My father, obviously he had the Macintosh 2CX set up in our home. We had a color monitor. We had an Image Writer 2 printer. We had the whole setup. And, just playing that. I remember Prince of Persia and just a bunch of other games that, just screamed like classic computer games, at the time. And it was that we had that. And then we had, we had the computer, but then my parents had an Atari 2600 from, I think it was their wedding anniversary gift. And so, the comparison of
fresh out of Sears.
What'd you say?
Fresh out of Sears.
Yes. So this Atari was like, what I grew up with being that was a video game system, and then the computer can do all these other complex graphics. So I was like, and so until we got a Sega Genesis, the first one that came out, until we got that, the computer was like, to me, the peak pinnacle of graphics horsepower and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, put it this way: I got my first PC in 1995 on my 13th birthday, and it wasn't a new one because my family were quite, I wouldn't say poor, but we didn't have a lot.
Oh yeah, same here.
The kind of TV we had, it was a 14-inch TV in the corner of the lounge. That was it. I had a TV of my own by that point, but that was many years of like errands and weekend and birthday money and stuff saved up to go and buy another 14-inch TV.
Yeah.
So the PC I got at the time, my dad took me into Hounslow and was like, okay, well, what do you want what do you want for your birthday? What computer do you want? And obviously, he's like, well, we can't afford a Mac. Yeah. That's right out. Even secondhand, they were like, no, you're not buying one. You need something capable. I settled on a 486. I still miss that 486. It was a good machine.
Yeah.
I even managed to get like Windows 95 running on it, but then upgrade. And then I came down to the custom PC route, and I never bought a PC ever again. It was only ever. I've probably still got at least one screw in my current machine that I had in that 486 somewhere, because I've just upgraded again and again and again and again and again. Over time, I think I even had the original floppy drive in my previous system, just just as a mark of respect, not connected, just in there.
Yeah.
But so anyway,
it holds it together.
Yeah, exactly. We bought this PC, and the idea was obviously, it was like, well, it's got write on there, so I can write homework and everything else. And both my mum and my dad were kind of a little bit, when it came to PCs. Oh, Dad could play solitaire, and Mum had done a computing course when the Amstrad PC 1640 was still being sold. So yeah, I'd say kind of ignorant. But yeah, neither of them really kind of like needed or wanted a computer at the time. And they were like, okay, well, you can get a game to play with it on the weekend. So obviously SimCity 2000 came from Mum, and then Dad went out to PC World on the Sunday and bought a copy of Doom, and then handed it to me when he asked me into the shed to go and fix the lawnmower. He's like, don't tell your mum. There's a copy of Doom. I've still got that boxed copy of Doom somewhere in a box in a barn.
So something tells me he might have wanted to play it a little bit too, maybe, or.
Actually, no. We used to play. My dad and I used to play Worms. First Worms. Because we played it on the Amiga. And I'm like hilarious, like literally falling about, laughing, like side-splitting hilarity at it. And yeah, that even today, it's still kind of, I can't play that game with a stoic look on my. It's still kind of like I'm, the holy hand grenade. Release yeah, that whole game, just the concept of it, the idea, that was the only game that my dad and I ever actually played together. He couldn't do fast-paced anything. I mean, about as energetic as he got with games was Minesweeper, I think.
Okay.
Or Worms was about it.
Yeah, with our 2600, I remember playing Warlords with my mother, and she loved it, and she was very good at it. So she was the one to beat.
Yeah. So yeah, and then from there, let's see what else. I think these days, I've definitely fallen more into RPGs, and I mean, I never did anything like. I wish I could have at the time done like a bit more in the way of like D&D, actual D&D, not necessarily like anything like in the computer realm of things. But again, it was the time of the Satanic Panic, and parents were like, "Oh, you're not playing Dungeons and Dragons, are you?" Like, no.
There are demons in that game.
People play Dungeons and Dragons. They go out and do drugs and stuff. Okay, Mum, whatever you say. You know. So again, never did that. But then I've gotten into like Cyberpunk 2077, and like I loved like the Fallout series. I'm not 76. 4 I liked, although I wish I had more RPG elements in it. But loved New Vegas. Everybody loves New Vegas. You can't go wrong with it. The dialogue is hilarious. You really do get like fully immersed in it. I love Skyrim. What else? My only other vice. Well, I've got 2 other gaming vices. 3 gaming vices, depending on my mood. Depending on my mood. If I'm in and like everything's caught fire at work and I've had a really tough day, I come home, I play The Division, I do multiplayer, and I'm just like, yeah. I'm sitting there with a grenade launcher, like running into a room like Leroy Jenkins, like, ruin your day, ruin your day as well.
I haven't played. That's Tom Clancy Division, right? Yeah, I haven't played. I haven't played that one. Now I'm curious.
I really like. I mean, the Division 1, playing through the Division 1 over the pandemic, as my brother did. That's kind of like, it's a pandemic just before Christmas in the wintertime. Of course, this is a bit prescient. This is a bit eerie. But I mean, I love the gameplay. It's one of those games that I thought I'd never get into.
Yeah.
I picked it up within about 30 minutes. I'm like, I love this game. I love it. I love the story. I love the atmosphere, the world building, the attention to detail in the world as well. I mean, and then you get the Division 2 come out, and then you end up with even more verticality of like you can explore everywhere, underground, up in a skyscraper, in the metro system, cool. Literally everywhere. And there's so much to do in it. Even after you've completed all of the end game content, which will take you a while to work through, unless you're like hardcore, kind of like getting yourself an IV of Mountain Dew and just sit there for 23 hours a day and like snooze with one eye open while you play. It will take you a while to get through. There's a lot of content in it.
So I grew up with obviously a Macintosh computer was the main machine that we had when I was a kid. And so we had a few video game consoles, but when it came to gaming on the Mac, there was obviously a smaller selection of titles. Yeah. And I was always excited when I would be in the game store because they would not really have Mac titles, but if it was a hybrid game, if they had both the discs in there, or it was a hybrid CD-ROM later on, then I was like, I don't care what it is. It could be a crummy game, but it has a Mac logo on it. I could play it. And so I would get excited by that. But one of the first ones I remember that was popular enough, besides SimCity and besides a few of the other classics, I really got into Unreal Tournament, the first one.
Yes. Oh.
Because it was Mac compatible. You could... What'd you say?
Monster kill.
I needed to get that on the audio perfectly. Thank you. But I mean, obviously you could play, which was, it was sort of groundbreaking at the time because you had the Mac and the PC version could play together. And, as long as you had the right patches and everything. And that is sort of, I cut my teeth on first-person shooters playing Unreal Tournament. And, later on we got a PC, and I tell this all the time, so forgive me for repeating myself, everybody who's watching that's not Kai, we had to get a PC for my mother to do work. And so obviously that was an avenue for us to play games on. But I will never forget my father unpacking it, being a diehard Apple person, and just saying, "This feels so wrong."
This is the thing that, because obviously I wasn't steeped in one way or another, because I kind of came from like the third path.
Yeah.
Because I came from like, British homegrown micros through like the Atari and Amiga kind of route, and then kind of having two paths after that to kind of diverge and having like a foot in both worlds at one stage or another. I've never been like, I'm hardcore Mac or I'm hardcore PC. It's like, they're both good.
Yeah.
Why not both? It's not like that meme. It's like,
yeah.
I don't mind either one.
Yeah, and I prefer the Mac OS for when I'm doing work and stuff like that. I have a PC for games. I've had a PC for games for ages. I use it to play games on. It's like a console to me. And yeah, there are certain applications that are only on that platform, so I use it. But I am, just one of those people that's like, I'll just use what I have to use to get the job done. That's what it is to me. It's a tool.
Yes, I know Scarlet Swordfish. No, it's the Atari and Amiga, not the classic homegrown British micros. It was the Acorn Electron and the Spectrum and stuff that I'd kind of grown up with leading into that.
I thought Neil was going to pop in back to the chat and start berating us about Atari stuff.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. My brain's gone blank all of a sudden.
No, that's okay. You fried a memory chip.
Oh yeah, that's right. Because you were mentioning UT,
yes,
and that's actually one thing that when that first came out, I was in sixth form at school, so like 17, 18.
Yeah, you're my older brother's age, so there's only a few years difference between us, I believe.
yes, probably. I mean, I was born in 82.
Okay,
so,
yeah, a little few years younger, but yeah, same bracket.
Yeah. And I distinctly remember, most people knew more than our school network administrator at that point.
I can see where this is going.
And by this point, so all of the school's machines, they were all like, anybody in the UK will recognize the brand, an RM branded computer. They were just generic machines with their logo on it, and it was the management package that they sold to schools. And these machines are ridiculously overpriced for what they were.
Yeah.
But hey, it was a school budget buying it, so who cared, right? But all of these machines had like a TNT2 Ultra in them. Every single one is a Pentium 3450 with a NVIDIA TNT2 Ultra and 64 megs of RAM and an 8 gig hard drive.
Wow.
This is like ideal for playing games on. This is great. So, first of all, I mean, this is also the era of the zip disk as well.
Oh, so, yes.
Oh, yeah. So every school computer also had a zip drive as well. And we use that to kind of create a custom Windows 98 install that would fit on a zip disk. And so we would put this in the drive and boot up Windows 98 from the zip disk, bypassing all of the schools like Foxy, Windows 98, like locked out settings, and the machine was connected to the network as well. So at that time we had a whole 1 megabit connection as well.
Wow.
So you could do multiplayer, and we ended up using that zip disk to amend, shall we say, the installation of Windows 98 on the internal hard drive. Because the thing was, if you changed anything on the internal hard drive when you were actually on the machine, you'd restart and it would wipe everything other than...
That's how our school systems were too, yeah.
So we used the minimal install to kind of boot into an environment where we could change enough of the files. So we had a section of computers in the middle of the computer lab in the library, which was also open on weekends. And when you're in a boarding school, that's important. Okay, it was behind a locked door, but thanks Wayne. He was the janitor that let us borrow the keys, and then we got copies cut. And then so anyway, we amended Windows 98 on the machines to install on boot over a network file share Unreal Tournament into the print spool directory. And then on certain user accounts, if you created a folder on the desktop, it was like you could create a folder for like Control Panel by doing the curve brackets. you could create a folder on your desktop which wouldn't show up on your network share, and it would show up as something that looked like, system from control panel, something innocuous. You double click that and it would launch Unreal Tournament from the principal folder in Windows 98. So, it was, everybody's gone home. Let's fire up UC. That's it. I'm kicking your ass.
We had a very lazier approach than that. That first off, kudos to you and your pals there figuring that out. That is awesome.
I will say this quickly. It took 3 years for them to figure out how to remove it from the machine. I left school. I came back for the next reunion. There were still 2 machines on the network which still worked.
Awesome. That is awesome. Yeah, we had PCs in my high school, and that was a big experience for me because I really didn't have much experience with PC at the time. We just had one at home, but one of the kids brought in a copy of what was it? I think it was on a CDR, and it was a Quake 2 demo, and so. All the machines were Windows 98 gateways, and they had I forget what the piece of software was. It was something like Freeze or Snow or whatever. It would basically when you make any changes to the file system, when you reboot, it would just wipe it all and just keep it in that state. You couldn't change it. And so we had a network drive because we were in a commercial art class, so we had bigger files. So we had like 20 megs or so set a lot for us, and so we got this CDR of Quake 2 demo, and we each hid it in each of our folders. We just made sure there was enough space for it, and the computers were set up like think of a parallel line. So all the monitors were facing each other, but the teacher's computer was set up in the corner, so she couldn't really see you if you were on a certain line. So we all sort of just switched machines one day, and this was in June towards the end of the school year. And all of a sudden, the network administrator, or the IT person, whatever he was, he started walking around the hallways and opening doors and being very, very confused of what was going on because of the demo that we were playing was sending so much network traffic across the system that he was very concerned that something was going on. And we repeated this practice with the UT 2004 demo when the classroom got a bunch of Emacs later on. So,
See, when I went to the university, it wasn't quite as locked down. You could connect your own machine to the university network, but there was still a proxy server in place, which lasted for about 8 seconds after I joined the campus. Because I set my own machine as a DNS server on the network. And I ran my own proxy through HTTP tunnel, and people were like, I can't play this or I can't do this. And I'm like, just redirect it towards my server on the network. Just change your DNS settings to this instead.
Oh man, yeah, that is it's just fun to think about because I mean today obviously there are much more. I think people are much more aware of what computers can do. And so, there's a lot more emphasis on security and locking things down and everything like that. But I mean, not that you say you couldn't get around it, but it's just you think back to those days and you're in school. Obviously, you're not there to play games, and it's like, oh, let's just have a quick game of UT while no one's watching.
Yeah. Just to answer RJ Adams' kind of request. So I did grind down from the top layer to the next layer underneath, which is a solid copper layer. So the way I've done mine is it goes top, which is mixed signal and 12-volt power. The next layer down is ground. The layer underneath is power. And the next layer under that is, again, mixed signal and ground. Now, it was theorized that, the middle was, it could just be just power or ground. And this was kind of verified by the fact that everything underneath, like where I'd sanded down, was just a solid copper sheet. And the only thing that it was connected to were ground pins or, plus voltage pins. There was nothing mixed. It was just dedicated ground and dedicated power on the planes in the middle of the board. Wow.
Well, that answers your question.
Huh?
I don't think you get a better answer than that. Thank you. Yeah, so
I'm kind of curious to know what other sort of questions people have
Yeah.
about either the process or just, you know, like anything else really. Kind of, I'm racking my brains. I feel like there's something I've forgotten.
It'll come to you.
It probably will. Probably after the stream is finished, I'll be walk into the kitchen to go make myself a sandwich.
Oh, of course.
Ah, damn it, not again.
Well, so we covered. I'll go through some things systematically, but please feel free. Anybody in the chat, we still have about 40 or 45 people watching, so thank you very much for tuning in. If you have any questions through as I'm rambling on, just some recap stuff here, please feel free to put in the chat, and we'll answer that. So we talked about Kai's growing up and his influence in electronics and his excitement with tinkering around with them, and sort of how he got bitten by the apple bug, and learning about some of the unfortunate things that could happen with the logic boards of old Macintosh computers, and then of course that led to the thought of, well, what if we just remade one, and went down that huge rabbit hole. We talked a bit about that process. And we talked about it for maybe 2.5 hours or so. And so there's
a lot to cover.
There's a lot to cover. And now we're just giggling about pranks and installed software on school networks and things like that. But please, if you have any questions related to Kai's reverse engineering skills or his interest or his projects, please feel free to ask.
I mean, Jay's just asked, when will we get, reversed, G3 and G4 PPC boards? What, like that one?
oh, like the accelerator, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is a Sonic Crescendo G3 250 for a 6100. I think it works, but again, this is just as good a candidate as anything else. I mean, the only thing that separates this from a Macintosh SE when it comes to reverse engineering is the density of the components, the availability of the components, whether or not you want to swap anything in and out. I mean, on this, for example, other than the G3 itself, there's a single Xilinx CPLD, what looks like 2 cache buffers, and that's it. And other than the G3 itself, it is a remarkably simple design, this one. So if I could take a broken one of these, one where all the chips on it are dead. Again, there's nothing stopping me from taking this board, scanning it, changing the trace width down a little bit further, and then sand down, get to the next layer, sand down, get to the next layer, so on and so forth. And if people, there's one thing I want to say is, like, if people want to help with getting, say, a classic board re-engineered, sand it. Take a dead one, strip everything off. If you can sand down and find out what's in the middle layers, and if it is just ground and power, send me the images, and I can do it in Sprint. I don't have to be physically present. I don't even have to have the board in front of me. As long as someone can strip it and scan it, anything's possible. And again, it's the classic is next on the list. I mean, I think I've hit peak Mac SE with the black boards, simply because I don't think there's anything else I can improve upon other than potentially putting the values of the individual components, in there, which has been done for like some of the larger capacitors and like the LS Logic and whatever. But other than that, I'm up for another project. If somebody wants to help get the SE, not the SE, sorry, the Classic or the Classic 2, the Color Classic.
I have some Classic and Classic 2 boards which have seen better days, which I'd be happy to sacrifice for the cause.
Ray, you're good.
I sent you a link on Discord there. There's this eBay auction of these Sonnet boards. I don't know if they're prototypes. They're claimed they're prototypes, but just the images I think will be interesting for you to look at. It looks like they are the
that is identical to the one I've got.
Yeah, so it looks like they're along the same type, but the beauty of it is I think they have decently high resolution photos. Obviously, it's a bit blurry when you zoom in. Anything other than 100%.
It's identical to this. The only difference is that is C61 G3 AV, and this one is C61 G3 AV PCB-C.
Okay.
This is a revision C of the board, but that would be very very interesting. If somebody wants to buy that and like scan it, and I mean, to take silk screen off parts like that, use a fiberglass pencil. There's some really nice detailed images on that as well.
Yeah.
I mean, you could. Do you know what? I reckon you could probably get one of those working. I mean, you get G3.
Yeah, see, that it goes down to, well, I mean, most of the components you could probably find. But I put the link in the chat there if anybody is so inclined to donate their time to do some scans of that. Feel free to let Kai know.
An Action Retro. Will I use a purple PCB? Do you know what? I'm actually really not fond of purple PCBs. My favorite has got to be the blue and gold combo. Just it looks good, and it's also not too expensive. Purple, I don't know. It depends on which fab does it. You can get some which are really garish, but I gotta say, if I was to do something like that, I'd do it in matte black with a gold finish, or for limited runs. I did inquire at Osh Park about this because they're the only people that offer this service, as far as I know. Is they do the option for a really nice, dense, like granite black, like almost marble finish, gloss black board with a clear solder mask, so you see copper traces everywhere.
Wow!
So it's copper on black. It looks like it belongs in a professional kitchen. It looks amazing. And I actually did inquire, like, on the SE boards. Oh, really? I'll have 3 boards in that, please. $400, you say?
I'll get back
to
you.
I've just got a thing to do.
What are you doing with those gold bars? They're selling them.
I mean, again, if people like put up their hands and like said ahead of time, I will buy one of these for this and stump up the money ahead of time. Sure, I'll get them made. But at the moment, it's everything's off my own back at the moment.
Yeah, and then obviously there's only so many free hours in the day, of course. So you have to choose what you want to get into carefully, of course. But I do like the idea of, obviously, the file is out there for or will be out there for those of the individuals who want the PCBs in different colors, and they could go nuts and do whatever they please.
I mean, at the moment, so obviously 68K MLA is the only place where the entire archive of the, not just the Sprint layout file, but also the scans which were used as the basis of the Sprint layout file are located.
And please tell me you have a personal backup of those.
Oh yeah, no,
Okay.
I have backups of it all over the place.
Good.
Google Drive as well. But the one thing I haven't generated the gerbers and put those in there. So you got the Sprint layout file, and you get all the other image files, which should be enough to generate gerbers should you so wish. But I don't know if I'm going to be putting those up on GitHub yet. I'd like to try and sort of get rid of what might I say? Get rid of. I'd like to try and sort of sell as many boards off my own back as possible.
I mean, recoup some of that
there
effort.
Are people to make their own, but I'd rather people kind of came to me and got like a nice shiny blue and gold.
Well, the second we end this, you're going to be swarmed with requests, and one of those is going to be by me. So
I hope so. I honestly hope so. I mean, I've got like 10,000 anti-static bags sitting on a chair. With the labels and everything, I've in fact actually I've got an example of how I sort of send these out. So obviously for the people with the blackboards, they get the certificate of authenticity, which is signed by me and numbered, and then they get the original blackboard in a proper anti-static bag, with the label on the back as well. And a couple of people in addition have also said, oh hey, can you ship me an RTC as well, or can you ship me a Sony sound chip, or literally everything that you've got that can help me make up a board. There's the one that I sent to Neil was actually the pre-production one of the black one, so that's like a one-off.
Wow.
The only thing that makes it different is the fact that it's got 2 test points for the VCC and ground, just to check that board's actually getting power, and the silk screen on the SIM sockets is inverted, it's mirrored for some reason, but other than that, it's functionally identical. But yeah, I mean, so like Neil, for example, he's got a full set of parts. Bruce, I sent him a board and basically a bag of like, have a 68K, have two ASCs, have like 3 million RTC, like everything that he could use to build both one of these up and also fix two SE30s as well.
Yeah.
And hopefully one of these and one of the wall art boards will also be going to Adrian Black, who again, without his contribution, things may have been a lot further behind. It wasn't an SE, but it was, it was a classic, and a lot of it it's sitting in a box in the lounge, just like, okay, that's next on the queue.
Yeah. And will be helpful to the classic and everything. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's got a board, two boards and a full set of parts as well, so that he can create one from scratch as much as possible. So literally the only thing I don't have are BBUs, which can be salvaged from classics. So.
Yeah, and that's a good question. I mean, is there anything that you would like to say to the audience of, hey, if you find this part, you find something I'm looking for. Obviously, there are so many things out there, and so many parts out there, and all this stuff. Is there anything that you are having trouble finding that you would love? Obviously, the 68K MLA group is fantastic, but you have a bit of an audience here. Is there anything in particular that you would love a donation of, or anything, or parts, or knowledge?
Do you know what, weirdly, I'm okay on the donations front. People have been sending me logic boards for the last 9 months. I have run out of places to put them. I even had somebody send me a complete Macintosh SE.
Nice.
As well. So I'm good as far as parts are kind of concerned. At the moment, with the fact that we've reverse engineered the glue, we're on our way with the ADB. The RTC chip is kind of, is next in the queue, and then the BBU. We're actually okay. I think the only one I would say would be the Sony sound chip, but like I said, they're available as commodity. You can buy 100 of them, and they are new. They have never been used. You can tell by the legs are not being like salvaged from a machine, and they're slightly shorter, and they're all been dipped in solder or remarked. They are original Sony chips. They come in Sony tubes. It's like, and so there's plenty of those. 26 LS30s. There are billions of those out and available. We figured out that the MC3488 differential line driver for the serial port, which has been unavailable for about 5 or 6 years now. You can actually replace that with an SN 75150, which is still produced. It's £1 from Mouser as well. Exactly the same pin out, exactly the same part, and it's actually way more efficient and dumps less heat. So you can still get the SCC, you can still get the VIA chip. It's just trying to figure out the functionality of as many of the pre-existing chips as possible at this point.
Yeah, and that's going to be an effort for each of the series of Macs. Obviously, some chips are moved from one model to the other, but like you were saying with the ADB chips and some of the other chips, and things evolve, I guess, as you get from the earlier 68K Macs to the later ones and the PowerPCs, of course. So it never hurts to have a good understanding of individuals looking into those.
Yeah. Jay, the link for the Sprint layout software is there. Like I said, it's cheap software. So it's less than $50. And the fact that you can do like a project of this magnitude, I mean, you are limited to 4 layers. But that's usually that's enough for like 90% of projects. I mean, most projects still only use 2 layers. For most stuff. But even if you do have like 4 layers and they're all filled with like mixed power and signal, Sprint will still do it. Yeah. There are some limitations which you'll kind of have to like learn your way around. But the manual is a 50-page PDF. It doesn't take a lot to learn it, and you can pick it up and you can be doing stuff within 10 minutes. It's nice. It's intuitive. Very German and very efficient. Because it is German and very efficient.
So Joshua is saying the board of my dreams is the Micron or Exceed Color 30, because him and his son, they want an 8-bit monochrome display on their SE30. Oh, that'd be cool. Internal monochrome.
All I will say is, okay, it's not my project, but it is being worked on.
Ooh, well, that's
When
enough I have to hear.
I'm not gonna drop names, but again, it's a 68K MLA like exclusive for the moment. But yeah, it's.
Well, that's exciting.
Give it another 12 months, and you'll definitely see like replicas that just work.
Yeah, I think we're on the sort of the cusp of, we're only like months and years away from some of these projects becoming reality. Because obviously, that board is just full of enthusiastic individuals like yourself who are working on a bunch of stuff. So awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
as
so
for Francois,
just
okay. So
yeah. No, sorry. That's what I was going to read.
No. I was just going to say. So Francois was saying, what does it have that KiCad doesn't have? So it's not a CAD package as such. It doesn't have any kind of schematic functionality. It doesn't have like project functionality, or like parts, anything. It is just layout software. You drag and drop from a library of parts, or you can create the parts manually by hand. But essentially, this is for you to just do like a quick piece. It's designed for you to be able to just go, I've got a schematic in my head. Let me just lay out the PCB. That's all I want to do. Or you could have a schematic next to you and then just again manually lay it out. It's not a full-featured EDA suite. It's just layout, and that's all. What KiCad doesn't do with the layout, KiCad doesn't allow you to have an image in the background that you can trace over, that you can copy. There is something you can do that I've seen done. I think Johan gave it a go, which was taking the gerbers that you can generate from within Sprint, backporting those into KiCad, then laying out the components on top, and then reversing that into a schematic. It's a long-winded process. It's possible. It's a bit janky, but it apparently works.
Wow. Well, that's quite a process, but it is. You got to do what you got to do. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So we're wrapping it up here. Kai has been so generous with his time here, spending over 3.5 hours with us at this point. If you have any final questions, please feel free to jump them in the chat right now. Obviously, you could find Kai on his phoenixengineering.org website. So that's wiki.phoenix-engineering.org. He's also on the 68K MLA. You do have a YouTube channel. I'm not sure if you want to promote that or anything else.
I do have the YouTube channel. The YouTube channel is I've not really used it for much, but I have popped up the bring up of the 1.5 board, and also a short kind of intro to kind of what I'm doing with the SE board on there. Although there's nothing kind of really specifically electronics-y on there, but hey, if you want to follow it in the case I do upload something mad and insane and new, then by all means, go for it.
Yeah, and I'll put that link in the description and the chat there. So,
you can also find me on Twitter as well. Steve knows where I am on Twitter. I lurk. I don't use it too much, but what I will say is for the Phoenix Engineering, that is open to everybody. Anyone can sign up there. Honestly, the more the merrier at this point. It's a dedicated server with nearly unlimited storage space and plenty enough, resources to run it if 1,000 people wanted to access it. If you have a project, or even if you just kind of discovered something cool, there's stuff on Ford Mondeo up there as well. There's other people putting their projects on there too. If you have a project, if you've decapped an IC, if you've figured out something cool in programming, just sign up, stick it in there in a wiki page. We want to kind of make this a kind of a hub for just mad projects. When you have an idea and you don't want to put it on GitHub, because have some hardware project, GitHub's not really designed for hardware.
Yeah.
Wiki articles for me seem to have a bit more in terms of flow and better formatting, and they read better.
Yeah, yeah. And from a person who is not that coding in mind, but it has a background of documentation. I agree with you.
Yeah.
Excellent. So yeah, that's so we've got your Twitter in there, got your YouTube in there, got your Phoenix Engineering site in there. Excellent. Anything else you wanna say before I let you go? I've been so gracious to have you here, so I greatly appreciate it.
I appreciate the opportunity as well. I mean, obviously, there's only so much noise you can make on a forum, and Hackaday kind of like jumped in with the kind of like, oh my god, it's happening, kind of, oh, okay, fine, quick, I'll hurry. But they never got back to me on the when I said it's finished and it's working. They were like, yeah, no, we're not interested now. Yeah, I think it was probably because I was a little bit grumpy that they just like went with the story and they didn't bother even asking me, and they got half of it wrong and had to correct it, and I was like, right, okay, so maybe there's some sourness on their part with it, but yeah, the more noise about this project, like the better.
Yeah.
If you have an SE that is damaged and you need a board, contact me. Send me sign up for 68K MLA if you're not already. Drop me a DM. Say, hey, I want a board, and you'll get a shiny new board sent your way. They're £36 each, plus whatever postage and shipping is to your location, either courier or local mail. You get a certificate of authenticity with it, and should I still have some in stock, then I'll send an ADB transceiver adapter in the box, and at least for the first 90 boards, I think for the first 90 boards, I can send you the oscillator. They all come with an oscillator. One thing I didn't mention, the 15.6672 megahertz oscillator that the Mac SE uses has not been available for about 20 years now.
Wow.
But again, I found new old stock CTS oscillators, brand new. So if you want a board and you don't want to have to get the the oscillator off your old board, and it can be a bit of a pain to like extract. Don't want to deal with the hassle of removing it. Again, it comes with the board, at least for the first 90 or so.
Excellent, awesome. Well, I'm certainly gonna hit you up for a board there, and I suggest everybody go to the 68K MLA page. I will post a link. say that again.
Consume, purchase, buy more. It's some subliminal messaging. Even people without SEs just need to go out and I have a funny inkling to go and buy one of these boards. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Even if you don't have an SE to put it in, buy one. Stick it on your wall.
It's
it looks
beautiful.
great.
Yeah, it's a conversation piece. What the heck is that? Well, that...
I do have plenty of wall art boards as well, which are genuinely faulty, but look really good. So...
I think I need a few. So... Yeah. So I'm going to let Kai go here. I profusely thank you again, sir, for your time. Your work is phenomenal, and it's been an absolute pleasure to sit here and geek out with you this afternoon. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Honestly, like I said, thank you very much for the opportunity to kind of get this out into the wider world. I think I'd just like to sort of finish off just by saying, thank you to the community for actually showing enthusiasm for the project all the way through, and also for the just for the help, donations of time, parts. Offers of oh, hey, do you need to purchase something from PE Connection? Yeah, sure, no problem. I'll PayPal me and I'll get it sent. That sort of stuff has been invaluable all the way through. This has not been this has not been a one-man band. Sorry, I just caught Johan's comment down the bottom. This has not been a one-man project, and I'm intensely grateful for all of the help and support that I've received all the way through this. So thank you to everybody.
And thank you so much. So with that being said, I'm going to cut Kai loose. Thank you very much, Kai, and hopefully we can talk again sometime soon. Okay. Oops, sorry. Yeah, you said off I go. Okay, so we're transitioning away. Okay, so Kai's Kai is okay. We're just there now. So I just want to thank everybody quickly for joining. I'm sorry the music went really loud for a second. That's my fault. It should be gone now. I know there's a YouTube delay. But thank you so much for joining today. Do appreciate Kai's time. An excellent project. Please go to the 68K MLA board. Go to phoenixengineering.org. check out his Twitter and Instagram. I will be posting all those links in the video description. I'm glad that Action Retro thinks this is his favorite show. Thank you very much. And we'll be on with another episode sometime soon. Check out Mac84.net for details. And go buy yourself a Macintosh SE reproduction board. I don't know what you're still doing here. Go to the board, buy that. That is just a fantastic project to be a part of. So thank you very much for tuning in. And now we're actually going to go to the closing slide. Thank you so much, guys. Take care.
Thank you.